I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Again, I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I'm one of your hosts. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. I have worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such things as Batman Incorporated, Justice League of America, and Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. However, for this evening, as well as all evenings kind of moving forward, my main love these days is KirbyTees.com. That's my t-shirt company. You can see what we have there, as well as potentially, consider purchasing a Retro Rogues t-shirt and supporting what we're doing here at Retro Rogues Live. You can see those and learn so much more about what's going on over there at KirbyTees.com. That's KIRBYTS.com. I want to thank my co-host, Mr. Eric Zanders, for joining us yet again. Eric, please tell the folks who will be watching and listening at home some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Yes, hello, everyone. My name is Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And I am, in addition to being the co-host of Retro Rogues Live, I am the chief financial officer of a small film production company in Arizona called Bad Bob Productions. And I am also the associate producer for a feature film called Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo and is currently streaming for free on Tubi.
Very cool. All right, so we're going to start off the show with our current review, right, Eric? So we're going to be talking about Mandalorian to start.
Yeah, I guess we're going to get right into it. It's going to be interesting tonight. Obviously, I'm sure people right now, a lot of people are kind of glued to their computers or television sets looking at election coverage because, that's just the way it is right now. But we're hoping that some of you folks want to take a break from all that and rather discuss some pop culture stuff, some entertainment stuff like The Mandalorian.
Very cool. I hope so. I mean, we'll see how it goes. So we're going to start off this evening. We're talking about, of course, the beginning of Mandalorian. This, of course, is season 2 or chapter 9. This episode was called The Marshal. So just real quickly, we'll talk about our initial impressions, and then we'll kind of go from there. So tell me, Eric, what were your initial impressions of this episode, The Marshal?
So initial impressions were pretty good. There were times that I felt the episode was getting a little slow, like it was lagging a little bit at times, I felt like. And there were just like these weird moments that were hard to describe where I definitely felt like I was watching a TV show. And I normally don't feel that way when I'm watching The Mandalorian. I normally feel like The Mandalorian very much goes alongside the feature films, the Star Wars feature films, like in terms of quality and everything like that. There were a couple of moments just here and there where I felt like, yeah, I'm definitely watching a TV show. I'm not watching a movie right now, which I haven't had that. I haven't really felt that way about The Mandalorian before this episode. But those are mostly minor gripes. Like I said, it did feel like it was a little bit slow at times. I did question a little bit here and there as far as some of the choices they made in order to tell the story. But I kind of felt like maybe they were going for sort of that spaghetti Western thing, maybe even a little bit of that grindhouse thing, like that Quentin Tarantino kind of film style or something like that, which I wasn't sure how that worked for me. It was a little jarring for me a little bit. Like it wasn't what I was used to. But of course, once we get there, the payoff at the end kind of makes up for everything else because I got what I wanted. So obviously we'll talk about that in the spoilers portion. But overall, I thought it was entertaining. I thought a lot of people I know have been commenting that it was interesting to see so much more about the Sand People. And there was a lot more about the Sand People, the Tusken Raiders, in this episode that we've really never seen before, which I did find interesting. So overall, impressions were good. I thought they had some pacing problems. There was a little bit of like I said, the episode sometimes felt a little too TV-ish to me, as opposed to previous episodes that I felt were very cinematic. This one did show its budget. I thought, like, I did show its budget as a TV show, but overall, I really enjoyed it. And quite frankly, it's all about the payoff at the end. What about you, Dave?
Well, I really enjoyed this episode. It had a whole bunch of stuff in it that I feel like was geared kind of to appeal to me anyway. Because I'm a big Timothy Oliphant fan. We're going to get further into that when we get into the spoiler portion of this. But I just really enjoyed this episode. I could see, I talked to some different people, had some different reactions. And do you think we should talk about those reactions now, or do you think we should talk about this after we do our spoiler kind of discussion?
Well, let's focus just on what you thought, and then we can sort of get into that a little bit later as we break down the episode.
Yeah, I just enjoyed it. I could see that maybe, for me, I would say you could kind of see the budget at times, like that they were a little strained, because this episode was very, for lack of a better term, adventurous with what they were trying to accomplish. And I felt like at times that I could kind of see, because a few people felt like it kind of drug in a few places. Like kind of like pacing problems. I don't know if it was pacing problems so much as sort of like a deliberate choice. I guess it's just kind of and you did say that you could definitely tell that they were definitely going for a Western feel. I mean, there's no way, if, ands, whatever about it. This was definitely intended to totally be a Western. It really very much was meant to be that. And I could see some of the pacing issues because I guess it's kind of weird, but I just don't feel like that watching the speeding bikes zoom across the sand dunes is quite the same thing as when someone's riding on horseback, because there's just more like sort of movement and potential danger because the horse could throw them, and whatever they showed them on the speeder bikes and they were zooming across, there didn't seem to be a whole lot. You could definitely tell that they were just sitting on a sound stage and they were like, act like you're going fast, and it was one of those weird things that it didn't take me out of it. But when people I were talking to were discussing pacing, I was like, they did spend an awful lot of time just showing us on the speeder bikes going across the dunes, because when they first go out at the beginning of the episode, and it seems like it takes a long time. So I could see some of the issues and the complaints with some of it, but overall, I just really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it, and there were a couple moments where I was pretty much grinning ear to ear and having a lot of fun. So overall, I very, very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did want to pick up on what you said about the speeder bikes. I think that did have a little bit of that moment where I kind of felt like I was definitely watching a TV show, like on a TV budget. It didn't feel as cinematic as a lot of the other episodes have and normally do, because I think the Mandalorian does a really good job at that in terms of just using its production value. They do a great job with that in terms of, like, it just does not look normally like a television show. But overall, also, I do think that there was a good contrast between the speeder bikes and when they were riding the banthas. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, like, for sure.
There's definitely something really cool about seeing, a bunch of banthas, in a big line, that was cool. That kind of stuff was cool.
Well, and I think it could have been too, just the way they kind of did the setup on that when they showed them on the speeder bikes, because it just really felt like they were sitting on little green boxes and they were sliding them across and they put everything in. I know that's not how they shot it, but for some reason with me, it just felt. I know, for example, like if we were doing a production, we probably couldn't afford to do a shot like that with the budget we'd have, but it felt kind of cheap. That's how I describe it. It just felt cheap. I don't know what it was about it. There was no movement, with them kind of bobbing up and down, or it just was so static. It was just like they're just sliding across screen. And then because of how they shot it, it just seemed like they were just on screen like forever.
Right.
I don't know what it was about it. It like the opposite of that would be what they did with the speeder bikes in the last episode of The Mandalorian with the two speeder bike, the scout troopers or whatever. Like, that stuff was fun because, but it was I guess it's just because we were riding with them, so it just didn't feel like it had much inertia. I don't know. It just really felt weird. So
yeah, there was something about the way that was shot that was a little bit off or something like that, I think.
For sure. So do we want to get into doing the spoiler conversation and then discuss a little bit of reaction, or?
Yeah, let's kind of just break it down from let's start at the beginning of the episode and let's kind of just go through it.
Okay, so the episode starts off with the Mandalorian is trying to look for information. He's and basically trying to find other Mandalorians because he feels like that they can help him find the child's homeworld, because that's what he's been tasked with, as he says. So he actually goes and meets up with someone who's supposed to have information, who's sort of a Cyclops guy, and he's running basically an underground fight club. And then in the fight club, we get to see some Gamorrean guards kind of going at it. So I really liked this scene. I thought it was really kind of fun. I love this shot where they're coming into the city and it's night, and the child's in the little hover carrier thing or whatever, and and they're just kind of walking into town, and there's these weird little creatures with red eyes kind of watching them all around. Like, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that first scene with the underground fight club and all that stuff. What did you think about it, Eric?
Yeah, I liked it, overall. I thought it was interesting. I mean, it made sense to me that the Mandalorian would be looking for other Mandalorians to help him out. I think that just made sense. And so you don't really need to explain necessarily how this guy necessarily knows of the Mandalorians or anything like that. Like, sometimes I think, a story can get really bogged down, especially with, something like Star Wars that has so much, this huge lineage and everything. You can get bogged down into details like that really aren't that important. You just got to kind of start moving the story along. And so I thought that was a good decision that they did, was they just sort of introduced this new character out of the blue. We know the Mandalorian's a bounty hunter. He's involved with the seedy side of, the galaxy. So, he's going to know people like this. And he figures that this guy is going to know, where some Mandalorians are. And of course, there's a little bit of a twist there because of the reason that he knows why he knows about Mandalorians, the reason that he's interested in the Mandalorians. It's not benign. And it's not even the traditional, I use them for bounty hunters sometimes and stuff like that. It turns out, no, the guy just is out there to steal their armor because it's valuable.
And that was really interesting. And that's what leads to that fight. A lot of people who've seen the trailer, I would imagine most people, if you're watching right now, you've seen this episode. But if you haven't, this is basically the scene that's in the trailer where he's kind of fighting the guys and there's that gladiatorial combat scene kind of going on. But I did really enjoy this scene and I thought it was kind of cool. And then, of course, the informant basically tells him, after quite a bit of effort, he tells the Mandalorian that, he knows that there's another of his kind, another Mandalorian on Tatooine. And the Mandalorian's reaction to this is pretty priceless because he's like, I'm on Tatooine all the time. Like, what are you talking about?
I like that. Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting too, because, he doesn't have a lot of leads, so he decides to follow it up. But in a weird way, I was almost thinking it's like, the one thought that crossed my head watching the episode was, well, could he have been talking about you? Because, we know he's never met this particular Mandalorian before, but if he's just heard rumors or tales of a Mandalorian, how does the Jinn not know that it's him, right? So I thought that was interesting. Basically he goes back to Tatooine. We get to see some characters we saw once before, the lady who runs the spaceport with the silly robots. And all that stuff. I could have gone without that.
I'll be honest with you. I could have totally gone without that scene. I am not a fan of that character at all.
Yeah, but they're just kind of reestablishing stuff that we've seen before, so we know it's kind of all in continuity. And then he asks around, and he finds out from her that there's this old mining town. In case you didn't catch, this was definitely going to be a Western. There's this old mining town way off, and she said that that used to be kind of a hub of activity, but that the Empire basically had destroyed it, which is why she couldn't see it, over the planet, or why no one really talks about it, because theoretically that town had been all but destroyed. So of course the Mandalorian goes out there to check it out. He borrows her speeder bike, and then when he gets there, lo and behold, it's this tiny little mining town with these settlers, and then we get introduced to another character that I knew immediately it wasn't who I think they were hoping we would think it was, because it's pretty obvious it's not him.
Yeah.
But we get to see the reintroduction of the armor of one of my favorite characters in Star Wars of all time. So what was your reaction to that, Eric, when we get to this small mining town and the Mandalorian's asking for information, and lo and behold, he comes in contact with the Marshal?
Well, I had the advantage of your theories that the last time we talked about the Mandalorian, when we did our review of episode 8, we did do some predictions and we did talk about some expectations of the next season. And you were the one that actually really let me know about, what to expect. And I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I didn't have a chance to review our last episode because I actually wanted to say, hey, look, we actually got some stuff right this time, because when we first tried to do predictions about the Mandalorian before it came out, I don't think we said one thing that was correct. I think every single thing we said was wrong. But in this case, that didn't happen. In this case, you mentioned specifically about the introduction of this character that was going to be essentially like impersonating Boba Fett. That was the way you put it, I think, when we talked about it many moons ago when we were talking about episode 8. You talked about that there is this character that apparently has been impersonating Boba Fett. He's from the Aftermath books. That's where I guess this character originated. And so there's this sort of story about this character that has basically taken on Boba Fett's armor and is quote unquote like impersonating him. So that's who I thought that's what I thought that was. I mean, you could tell the armor was off. It was very beaten up. It was also incomplete. You could see that. So, I immediately was like, hey, I remember what Dave told me. So I totally assumed that's who that was. And I have to think that's what you assumed as well, Dave, since you said that's what was going to happen.
Yeah, I knew. You could tell immediately too, because the armor is kind of is very it's out of proportion with the person who's wearing it. So it's very clear.
It doesn't quite fit him right. Yeah, that's true. Right.
It's very clear that someone is wearing someone else's stuff. And then when we get the reveal, I couldn't escape, because we kind of knew this was probably going to happen, and I did bring it up, but I couldn't escape the irony that Timothy Oliphant is playing the Marshal. And I have been on this show talking about how if you want to see a fun show, you need to go to Hulu. You need to watch Justified, because Justified is a great show. And in that show, Timothy Oliphant plays a U.S. Marshal named Raylan Givens. So the fact that he was playing the Marshal in The Mandalorian, it wasn't quite typecasting, because he's kind of a different kind of character, but he just fits that Western aesthetic, because he was also in the HBO show Deadwood. And he just whenever he plays a kind of, whether it's supposed to be modern, whether it's supposed to be science fiction, he just fits that Western aesthetic really good. The way that he talks, the way that he moves, the way that he looks, he fits that mold really well. So, and I'd heard rumors about this. I'd speculated about it on the show, but actually seeing him and realizing he is actually playing the Marshal, I got a huge thrill out of that, because I just thought that was so much fun. So I was pretty excited. And I love the fact that right off the bat, he's like, are we going to do this here? Are we going to do this right now? Because basically right off the bat, our Mandalorian is just like, take the armor off, take it off, take it off.
There's no doubt in his mind that this guy's a fake. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's awesome, because there's no, and just classic Western style, there's not really a lot of words about it. The Mandalorian's like, okay, we're going to go. And then the Marshal is just like, you want to do this right here? You want to do this right now? And he stands up and he puts his hand near his gun holster with and I was just like, oh, this is fun. So see, that's what I'm talking about, because you can't say I've got my cam turned off, but I'm grinning ear to ear. I just really had a lot of fun with this episode. And I love that whole little bit between the two of them. And the fact that it's one of my favorite TV show characters versus the Mandalorian made it even sweeter, because I was just like, oh, this is fun for me. I was loving it. And again, I'll plug it one more time. If you haven't seen it, go watch Justified on Hulu. I enjoyed all that. And then in the midst of this, before they get to really throw down, or what are let's use a Tombstone vernacular, before they skin those smoke wagons, lo and behold, outside in the town, there's this crazy rumbling and this weird thing going on. And they both go over to the edge of the door and they're looking outside, and there's this weird creature that's just like tearing through town. And immediately I thought of, like in the Westerns, like sometimes you'd see like the buffalo herd or whatever just come running through the town, or a cattle stampede or something, and tear stuff up and knock stuff over. And it reminded me of that for half a second. But the main thing it reminded me of was Dune. And I kept thinking about, that in the original, Han Solo was, at one point a spice runner, right? And so I couldn't help but think of Dune. And so in the midst of all this, they kind of make a pact, the Mandalorian and the Marshal, two M's there. They make a pact, and basically the Marshal agrees. He's like, okay, well, look, I'll give you the armor if you can help me take care of this threat. He's like, I took out these slavers a while back, and I've been using the armor to help protect the town. But this creature that's tearing through here, I can't do it alone. He's like, but I think between the two of us, maybe we can.
I think you need to go back a little bit, because that was a pretty significant thing, I thought. And it was one of the things that I wasn't sure if it worked very well, which was when the Marshal tells his backstory of how he obtained the armor. It's pretty significant. So basically, they decide to do a flashback. And the way they did the flashback, I thought was, it wasn't bad. But that's where I kind of felt like it was like, I think they're doing some very specific, stylistic choices here that I'm not sure I like, in terms of just the way the storytelling is done. Flashbacks in general in Star Wars are kind of like a little bit of a faux pas. There's some controversy about that, about doing flashbacks in general in Star Wars. I know it was a big deal when they did that in some of the Disney Wars stuff. There was actually a lot of controversy among fans about that, because that's just not something that was done in Star Wars prior to that. The first 6 episodes, they never did a flashback. That just didn't happen. So they decided to do a flashback to tell the story of the Marshal, which is interesting, because what you find out is apparently on Tatooine, as soon as the Death Star was destroyed, some sort of mining consortium came in almost immediately and tried to take the planet over. Which they don't mention it in the flashback, but that actually in terms of the lore is kind of interesting, because this is also a time when the Hutts have basically been eliminated. Jabba the Hutt had been killed, right? Just like a couple of weeks earlier, or whatever the time frame was before the Death Star was destroyed. So it makes sense that there was this huge power vacuum on Tatooine, because Jabba the Hutt had already been killed, and then the Death Star blows up, and what you find out is the garrison on Tatooine was like, we need to get out of here because we got to go fight some rebels. You know what I mean? There's like no backup. We got to go, So they left, and there was this huge power vacuum, and almost immediately, Tatooine, unlike what we saw, I guess, in the new version of Return of the Jedi, where we see them all celebrating, and stuff like that, they already were having this sort of mining consortium come in and try to take over, and very brutally and all that stuff, where they basically started, massacring people in the town. And so he escaped this massacre along with the bartender, the bartender that was actually already introduced earlier in the episode. They had escaped together, and eventually what happened to him was he was just wandering through the desert, but he happened to have taken this valuable cargo with him of some sort of like very valuable crystals with him, which, by the way, is of course in that ice cream maker thing that, Favreau is completely fascinated with. He's just like so into that ice cream maker thing from Bespin, He's so into that. So of course that's what the crystals are is in that ice cream maker thing. So he's wandering through the desert. He's got these valuable crystals, but of course he's dying of thirst, so they're not of much value to him at that point. But lo and behold, he runs into a Jawa sandcrawler, and they basically save his life, and he trades them the crystals, which are very valuable, for this armor that the Jawas have recovered. And you immediately can see, of course, you could tell, when the first scene when he showed up, But you can see it even better, I think, with in the Jawa scene, that this definitely is Boba Fett's armor. And of course that does put out the question, how did the Jawas find it? You know what I mean? So, which there is a little bit of an interesting clue later in that episode that might actually tell us how the Jawas got that armor. So it's kind of interesting because, of course, me as a huge big Boba Fett fan, I'm sitting there, thinking like, okay, so what's going on here? So they found the armor, obviously, where's Boba Fett? So did the Sarlacc digest Boba Fett, but was not able to digest the best, Beskar armor? That's what they call it.
Beskar.
The metal that it's made out of. So all this stuff is going on, and then eventually he gets the armor. He decides to go back and he cleans house. He takes out the consortium, and he also does something really cool, which is that he actually shoots off the missile from the jetpack and blows them up as they're trying to leave. So all that stuff happens in that flashback.
Well, yeah, and the flashback, it's interesting too, because I enjoyed the fact that when the Marshal shows up to take out the mining consortium, which they say that they were basically enslaving people too, and when he shows up, he handles it the same way Raylan Givens would in Justified. He just guns them all down. Like that's all I can think of. It's just like, wow, this is totally the way it would go down in Justified, because he's a deadly shot, and usually every time he shoots somebody, they're dead. So I had a lot of fun with that. So I'll be honest with you. When they did the flashback, this is what made me think of, rightly or wrongly, not just spaghetti westerns, but when we talk about television, this is the point at which this episode started reminding me of the way that they used to pace and set things up in Kung Fu. Do you remember did you ever see the TV show Kung Fu back in the day?
Oh yeah, I used to watch it all the time as a kid in reruns.
And there'd be, and they always had tons of flashbacks because Kwai Chang Caine would come into town, something would happen, he would do something, and someone would react to it, and they'd be like, "How did you know how to do that?" And then here comes the little wavy screen, and grasshopper and all this stuff, and then before you know it, we're getting the backstory of something that he trained in, and it's something that isn't just for that moment in time, but will be relevant later on, in the episode. And I did think it was interesting. The biggest question I had from that flashback scene, Eric, the thing that is still sitting with me right now, we know that the Jawas, they scavenge things, anything that they could find. But I did find it curious, and I'm really hoping they answer the question of exactly how did the Jawas get the armor? Like how exactly?
There's a clue. There's a clue in this episode as we move on. Actually, I think pretty quickly. Actually, I can tell you the clue that they gave you in the episode.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead, because I must have totally. Was it at this point or was it later in the show?
It's a little bit later. So at this point, right? Obviously, the Marshal has explained how he got the armor.
Right.
Basically, the Mandalorian and him come to an agreement that if Mandalorian wants that armor back, because it is Mandalorian armor, he'll gladly give it to him if he'll help him with the dragon, the Kyrite dragon. Is that how you pronounce it? That's a famous. It's kind of a famous non-spoken character or non-named character, because if you are into Star Wars, you know that when Obi-Wan Kenobi was able to scare away the Sand People that had actually attacked Luke, when he does that roar, that's the Kyrite dragon, right? That's the roar that he's doing, which the Tusken Raiders are very afraid of. And that's actually relevant for this episode, right, as it goes forward. So they decide that the Mandalorian and the Marshal come up with this agreement that, the Marshal will give the Mandalorian the Boba Fett armor if he helps him slay the dragon, which is also interesting because this is a Western, but now we're going to be slaying a dragon.
And it's interesting too, because we're also talking about armor, because a lot of times, a knight will, or a squire or whatever, will go on a quest. And once they accomplish their quest and they come back having accomplished this thing, then they actually get knighted and then they actually get their armor. So it was interesting how this stuff kind of, I don't know. That's the thing about what Favreau and his crew are doing with The Mandalorian that I really enjoy, is that it's really interesting the way that they kind of tie everything together. And I can't believe I totally missed that clue, but we'll get further into that. So So basically, they decide, okay, let's team up. We're going to go out here, and on the way there, they kind of make a stop over, and it seems like they're being trailed or something. And they're being followed, and lo and behold, it turns out that it's the Tusken Raiders. It's the Sand People. And initially, the Marshal is thinking, let's gun them down. Let's gun them down. Let's get out of here, right? Because he is afraid of them because they have been raiding this little town. He's also killed a lot of Tusken Raiders defending the town, we find out.
Right.
And the townspeople and the Tusken Raiders don't get along, which obviously this echoes a Western. I don't have to draw any illusions or pictures here for any. I'm pretty sure they get what's going on here. But what's kind of fun and cool is that the Mandalorian, he speaks Tusken Raider, and he's able to, again, it goes back to that thing. He says, well, I've spent a lot of time on Tatooine. What are you talking about? There's another Mandalorian on Tatooine. And so he speaks Tusken Raider, and this starts something in this episode, but that I personally really, really loved. And it's the fact that a lot of this episode is spoken in Tusken Raider.
Right.
And so it's like sort of like through body motion or pantomime or whatever you want to call that we learn things. And there's kind of fun scenes where, the Marshal will be saying something to them, and the Tusken Raiders are reacting, and then the Mandalorian say, hey, and he's like translating and chilling everybody out, and it's really fun. And I loved all that stuff. But anyhow, the Tusken Raiders apparently have been following them. They're aware. I think it's a crate dragon, but maybe I got that wrong.
That sounds right. Crate dragon.
Yeah, and so they've been following this creature too, and they've also experienced a lot of loss. At least that's what they say, and they want to join in. They want to help. They want to help take care of this problem, and so they have the classic, sort of Western parlay where they're trying to connect, and the translator is trying to keep the peace, and all that stuff's fun. And so, what did you think about all that, Eric? Did you enjoy a lot of the Tusken Raider stuff and how we kind of learn a little bit more about them? And
yeah, I think it's interesting, because obviously they established, that's one of the kind of nice things about this show is even though it's not 100% serialized, it is very episodic. They have this the writing is good enough that they can remember what they did and they established in a previous episode. And if you pay attention, that obviously the Mandalorian knows the Sand People very well. We got that from that previous episode where he was dealing with that bounty hunter, and the Tusken Raiders totally got the jump on him. But the Mandalorian knew that they were there. He was able to communicate with them. They were able to parlay with them. He's dealt with them many times before, and you get that in that one little scene in the previous season. So now you get a payoff here where you take it even further. So we already know he has a relationship with these guys, but now you get to see that he actually speaks their language. He really kind of understands how they think and all that kind of stuff. And he's able to sort of build this coalition between the Raiders and the townspeople, which are, they're basically, diametrically opposed to each other. The Tuskens are Raiders, pure and simple. That's how they subsist. That's how they survive. They raid the townspeople, So it's kind of interesting that, the Mandalorian of all people starts to make this little bridge between, the townsfolk and the Raiders.
And it's a lot of fun. And I just really enjoyed all of this. And really, really thought it was just, because that's the thing. It's like, whatever little issues I might have had kind of here and there, there's just so much fun stuff in this show. That I just thoroughly loved all this. I thought this was a lot of fun. And to quote Yoda, good relations with the Sand People, the Mandalorian has. So that was really kind of fun. So I can't remember exactly. I think they go out and they surveil where the crate dragon is.
The lair, yes. The Raiders know where the dragon goes. And this is where that clue comes in, Dave, about what might have happened and how those Jawas might have gotten a hold of that armor. So the little clue, and it's not necessarily 100% that it's the same thing we're talking about, but they mention specifically that the lair of the dragon is actually it's like the husk of a Sarlacc pit. In other words, the Sarlacc had died, and what's left over has become the nesting place for the dragon.
Right. Now, see, I caught that, and I caught that basically they're kind of alluding to the fact that Boba Fett must have killed the Sarlacc that was in the pit in the process of escaping.
Or the dragon did. I mean, I
yeah.
took it as the dragon might have killed that. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing too, because that's what they were talking about was, well, what can kill a Sarlacc? You know what I mean? So they were kind of like, and I think you could go with either interpretation there as far as what might have killed the Sarlacc. Of course, we don't know that that's the same Sarlacc either. You know, we don't know that's the same Sarlacc that Jabba the Hutt was going to put Luke into. But that's how I felt there was a big clue there that they wouldn't just say that for no reason, and you know, that basically, and obviously, you know, he found the armor relatively close to where the pit was because he was just walking through the desert, you know, when he found the Jawas. So my thought is that obviously the Sarlacc died. However the Sarlacc died, we don't know for sure. Might have been the dragon that killed it. Might have been Boba Fett that killed it. We don't really know. But we do know that the Sarlacc died, and now this the dragon is actually nesting in what used to be the Sarlacc pit. Without the Sarlacc, the Sarlacc's gone.
Right, and so they start discussing what they want to do, and then they're trying to formulate a plan, and then they realize to quote Split Second, which I know you didn't care for too much, Eric, but to quote Split Second, they realize they need more guns. They need big guns. They need more guns. So at that point,
more people.
Yeah, right. Well, that's where I was going with that. So they decide that they need the help of the townspeople. And
now you're missing a fun scene though, because remember, the Tusken Raiders do try to lure the dragon on their own before. Plan.
Yeah,
and I know I was watching this with my brother and my daughter. My daughters, and we got quite a chuckle out of that scene where they decide, because my brother was actually talking about this, because I guess a lot of this stuff actually comes from Knights of the Old Republic, and my brother's really into it, and he was telling me this is totally a callback to the Knights of the Old Republic, because I guess there's a thing where you actually use a bantha to catch a crate dragon, like in the game or something like that.
Oh, okay.
He was telling me about it. So he was totally like ahead of them, saying, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Use a bantha, and then you can draw it out, and then you can engage the dragon, right? Because the dragon doesn't come out willy-nilly on its own.
Right.
So it's like they need someone to get it to go. And of course they have this Tusken Raider go out there with the bantha to do that. And then of course, what does the dragon do? Totally ignores the bantha and just eats the sand person, which is like, okay, so that's why these guys are afraid of these things, you know, and they hear them roar and they run away, you know. So I thought that was neat. I thought, and that's also a callback to the original Star Wars. You know, that's why the Sand people are so afraid of these things. I just like that. It just totally ignores the huge, big bantha and just eats the sand, you know, eats the Tusken Raider, just gobbles them up.
Right. It was a funny scene. And so they basically determine, well, because they're putting these little pebbles down as they're kind of coming out with their diagram, and then after that happens, you see them doing the diagram again, and they're sprinkling way more little pebbles down. Yeah. And so, you know, the Mandalorian tells the Marshal, it's like, well, we're going to need the townspeople to help. And he's like, well, look, the townspeople and the sand people, like, man, they don't get along. Like, we killed a bunch of these guys. Like, these guys, you have to be people they've killed. And so anyhow, it sort of forms they have to kind of form like a bit of an alliance. They go back to the town. They bring the townspeople out. And then we have that the conversation between, you know, the sand people and the townspeople, where they're you know, basically hashing out their plan and deciding, you know, to try and work together or not.
Yeah, I like the way it's presented too, because it actually makes quite a bit of sense. Because, you know, like I said, you know, the Mandalorian acknowledges the fact that the Tuskens are raiders. That is their lifestyle. That's how they're not farmers. You know, like most of the people, like, you know, like Luke's uncle and aunt, they were moisture farmers and stuff like that. So that's not how they subside. They subside by raiding the townspeople, essentially. So they make the point that I thought was kind of neat, that first of all, the dragon is sort of a natural enemy of the Tusken Raiders. So they want to get rid of it. But more than that, because it's so large, they know they can subside on that dragon, you know, for a very long time. The same way that like Neanderthals would subside on a woolly mammoth, you know, how they were essential to their lives. So they know if they can slay the dragon, the Tusken Raiders won't really have to raid the townspeople anymore. And even because they will be so grateful that they have the dragon, they'll actually become like allies of them and be willing to help them if they're attacked again or anything like that.
Yeah, it's cool seeing they make this kind of pact and they go, okay, we're going to work together, and then we get sort of the journey across the desert. But see, this is the part where like you were saying, I enjoyed seeing all this and it didn't bother me because we've got banthas, we've got speeder bikes, we've got the townspeople, and we've got them basically making the journey back to the Sarlacc pit, which is where the Great Dragon is residing. And so they're going to go out there and they're going to take care of it. So they set up their plan. They've got this explosive, and then they bury this explosive, and they set up this elaborate thing where they want to lure the Great Dragon out, and everyone's going to engage it. And while it's distracted, they're going to try and get it to come out just far enough out of the cave that they can set off this explosive. And then the thought is that this explosive, is going to be able to kill this Great Dragon. And typical best laid plan sort of fashion, basically nothing works the way it's supposed to work, and everything pretty much goes to hell pretty quick. And then it just turns into just sort of like this crazy fight for survival where everyone's trying to figure out what they're going to do. And this is another one of those scenes that had me grinning ear to ear, because we learned that the Marshal knows how to use Boba Fett's jetpack. And of course, Mando has his jetpack. And so they start zooming back and forth battling this dragon. So we basically have, I know it's not Boba Fett, but he looks enough like Boba Fett. I had a lot of fun imagining this was Boba Fett and the Mandalorian working together trying to kill this dragon. So I was just thoroughly loving all this and having a hell of a good time with it. And then eventually, and let's just stop right there just real quick. What did you think about this, Eric? Were you enjoying it too? This crazy battle?
It's the highlight of the episode. I mean, there's a lot of action. It's really interesting to see the way the Tuskens are. They have like these big sort of like I can't remember the term, the ballista, like they have the big ballista type of
right
weapons that they're using and things like that. They're very kind of archaic in a lot of ways, but that's how they hunt these things. And it's kind of interesting to see what they're doing and how they're trying to interact. And then you got the townspeople, and they're trying to do their thing. But of course, it's the Marshal and the Mandalorian that kind of steal the show because they have the fancy equipment, so they can actually do the really cool stuff. And it is neat to see them, obviously, for the previous season, the Mandalorian never had a jetpack. So now you get to see that apparently he has been practicing with the thing and he's pretty good at it. So.
And it's cool too, because and this was I found this interesting too, because even though there's kind of at times these allusions to Dune, I did think it was interesting how because I was wondering by the time that the dragon comes out, is something going to happen that's going to be a callback to Dune, right? Like that's what I was kind of expecting with the way the Great Dragon looked. I kept thinking, so we're going to get a Dune callback. We're going to get a Dune callback. And I thought it was really interesting how there isn't really like a lot of quote unquote Dune, whether it's symbiology or whether or not like this is just definitely it's just a Western, and they're not really concerned with that at all, because I was half thinking it's like, well, at some point something's going to call back to that. And I thought it was interesting how we didn't get any callbacks to Dune at all. Because there's, like I said, there's elements of this that remind me of just, Westerns in general, whether you want to talk about the old, the spaghetti Westerns, whether you want to, like, for example, I said there were a lot of moments of this reminded me of the Kung Fu television series from back in the day. So I just thought it was really interesting how there's obviously callbacks to Star Wars. There's all these kind of fun things kind of either through the symbiogy and everything kind of wrapped up in it. And it's really kind of fun and interesting. But I did think it was kind of unusual that we didn't have any Dune really references at all, because I was really kind of expecting one. So, but anyhow, they battle the dragon. They finally managed to quote unquote slay the dragon. And then the Sand People get their reward. the Marshal relinquishes his armor to the care of the Mandalorian, which I both liked and didn't like. I liked it because it made sense, but then I didn't like it at the same point too, because I just thought it was kind of weird, because now the Marshal doesn't have, you know what I mean, his thing that's helped him, kind of to protect the town. But it made sense because we have the
Raiders now.
Right.
They have an alliance with the Raiders now.
So they head back to the town, or at least they're on their way, and the Mandalorian is headed back to the Mos Eisley spaceport or whatever to get the Raven Crest, and we see him zooming across the sand dunes, and then we get our big, huge last moment thing, our big cliffhanger type moment. So tell me, Eric, what did you think of that when you see the speeder bike zooming across the dunes and there's someone watching the Mandalorian, and then he turns around, and what was your reaction?
Well, like I said, I wasn't like, I didn't think it was a perfect episode, and there were times that I had issues with it, and there were times that I struggled with it a little bit because of the issues that I mentioned before. And once I saw that, I was like, okay, well, that was worth it. That was worth the price of admission. That was worth my what I pay for my Disney Plus subscription, because that's what I wanted. When we did our prediction thing, as we talked about earlier, you talked about this character that your understanding was he was going to be sort of this imposter that was kind of impersonating Boba Fett, which he wasn't really impersonating Boba Fett. He was just using the armor for practical reasons, because the armor gave him a tactical advantage over all the people that he was having to deal with to protect this town. But I just thought it was just so awesome to see. Yeah, you know what? The real Boba Fett is there. The real Boba Fett is still alive. The real Boba Fett is around. We don't get any information about what the hell is going on. Like, why didn't he recover his armor already? Because apparently he's like right there. What is he doing? How did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? There's nothing. It's just, we just know he's there. And for whatever reason, he never went and got his armor back.
Well, it's interesting too, if you notice, because it looked like that he had this thing kind of strapped over him, and he had all these different weapons, and it looked like among those was actually like a Tusken Raider, like their stick with the little sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, little prong on the end of it or whatever. It looked like it looked like he had, like, he'd been collecting all these different weapons or something, or he had acquired them, and he had, like, just kind of slung across his back, kind of thing. And it's interesting too, because when I first saw that, I didn't immediately think Boba Fett, and the only reason I didn't is because there's been all these rumors that Temu Morrison might actually just be playing like a clone trooper, from like the Clone Wars. And I know that because of Filoni's connection to Clone Wars, and Favreau has a connection to Clone Wars because, of course, he played Pre Vizsla in the Clone Wars. I wondered if he was just going to be just a clone. So I didn't immediately I was super excited because, like, it's Boba Fett. But then I was like, well, wait a minute, maybe it's not.
Okay, we need to go there.
Well, yeah,
before we do have to acknowledge that Jane is in the house. We've had the Rogues Gallery been pretty silent, but she was saying hi. So, hey, Jane, it's good to see you.
Hi, Mom. But what was really cool about that is when I went on IMDb, because I wanted to check it, he is credited in the cast as Boba Fett. He's not credited as, mysterious figure. He's not credited as, any number of things. It just straight up says Boba Fett.
Well, there was a, our friend PJ from Orville Nation, he actually did an entire broadcast. He did like a mini broadcast. It was only like maybe 10, 15 minutes. I actually got to watch it on a replay. I didn't get to see it live. If I had seen it live, I would have been commenting to him like crazy about how silly I think this is. But what he was talking about was that basically there had been this big rumor, even after the episode came out, where people were saying what you're just saying right now, Dave, is that people were saying, no, he's not Boba Fett. He's somebody else. He's a clone trooper, or, he's, I don't know what else he would be besides a clone trooper. But apparently, according to PJ, in Orville Nation, there's all sorts of YouTubers and theorists out there that are saying, no, he's not. That's not Boba Fett. And I just have to say, from my perspective, sometimes fans just overthink this stuff way too freaking much. And that's just my response to that. It's like, that's Boba Fett. I'm sorry, that would make no narrative sense whatsoever for him to be anybody but Boba Fett. It just doesn't. It wouldn't make any sense. You know, I've seen enough of what Favreau and Filoni are doing. They wouldn't randomly put some clone trooper, you know, on Tatooine just so they could throw us off that that's not Boba Fett. I mean, obviously this is supposed to be, hey, yes, Boba Fett's still alive, period. You know, it's canon, it's official. Just have fun with it. Just enjoy it. Boba Fett is back.
Yeah, and I kind of took it as that too. That it was, like I said, my initial, but I just had this half a second while going, well, maybe it might not be, but I felt pretty confident it is. And then I go and I look at it at the credits, and it's like, oh yeah, it is Boba Fett. And it's important to remember too that when people speculate and theorize, I think sometimes that people are forgetting that this show is The Mandalorian. You know, it's about the, even if we might want it to be the Boba Fett show.
Made that point that it absolutely is the Boba Fett show.
No,
you know,
but what I'm saying is it's not the Boba Fett show in the sense that Boba Fett is the star of the show. You know, he's going to play a role in this season, right? And he's going to be a character that's in The Mandalorian. But that's to cast him as a clone trooper, or have him secretly be a clone trooper that, you know, that eventually is revealed to be Boba Fett, or he's not really Boba Fett. It turns out he is just a clone trooper. Like, you know, all that kind of stuff is kind of fun, but that means we're going to spend an awful lot of time just delving into who this particular character is. And what I'm saying is it's important to remember that this show's about the Mandalorian and the child. So in my mind anyway, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's like, well, it has to be Boba Fett, because otherwise we're going to spend an awful lot of time trying to figure out who this guy is just to have like a second reveal. It's not really this person. He's actually, you know, like, so I was like, no, they wouldn't do that. No, it would just waste a lot of time.
Sorry, I just find that entire notion just completely ridiculous. You know,
right? And
I've made the argument this is the Boba Fett show, and that was one of my criticisms early on. Is like, why isn't this just the Boba Fett show? And I think this is kind of like their answer to that. Like, it's like, no. This was always going to have Boba Fett in it. This was always going to have Boba Fett in it, because there is that scene. A lot of people believe that scene where we see this mysterious figure that we never see their face, that actually is on Tatooine and ends up finding the body of that assassin that the Mandalorian ends up killing. You know, with that bounty hunter character, that scene that I alluded to before, that was the last time we saw the Mandalorian on Tatooine. A lot of people said that was Boba Fett. A lot of people, and I believe that they were right, that has been shown to be correct, that absolutely was Boba Fett, and now we have confirmation that was Boba Fett. He's still stuck there on Tatooine for reasons we don't really know. We don't know why he's never recovered his armor, because it seems like he's been just hanging out right outside the town where it's been this whole time. I guess the other interpretation of that could be that he just happened to finally find this place at the same time the Mandalorian was leaving it. But that seems like that would be awfully convenient if that was the case. So there's a lot of unanswered questions just with the Boba Fett deal. We don't need to have another character. Again, I think that would just be a complete waste of time. So there's plenty of questions to be asking right now about Boba Fett. How did he get out of the pit? How did he lose his armor? Why hasn't he recovered his armor before? Why hasn't he left this frickin' planet? What's left for him on Tatooine? Why is he still stuck there? What's keeping him there? I don't know if they're going to answer any of those questions. The only thing I can hope is that we are going to get some more interaction between Boba and the Mandalorian, and that Boba's going to want his armor back. I mean, that seems to be the most obvious thing, and that's where I'm hoping and thinking it's going to go.
Well, and I kind of took it, and I'm pretty sure most people watching this who've seen The Mandalorian know, but that episode with the gunslinger, I think that wasn't that the gunslinger episode?
I think that is called the gunslinger.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, the one with the young gun, the kid who wants to be the young gun, that episode actually took place on Tatooine. That was the first time that we'd gone to Tatooine in The Mandalorian. So it even further, you know, kind of in my mind helps to solidify that idea that was Boba Fett. And I wonder too if it might have been. Well, we'll see. We'll see what they do. I'm not going to do a whole lot of speculation.
Why not? That's what we're here to do, is to speculate. What are you talking about? My based on speculation.
My thought is that the Mandalorian. Well, the Mandalorian has Boba Fett's armor, and I think the reason that Boba Fett doesn't have his armor back is I almost have this feeling like he wanted to see who was going to come looking for it, or who was going to come looking for him, maybe even.
Right.
And I think that's why he was watching. I think he was following and kind of stalking the whole time. And and I don't know if it's because he might make a play to actually take the Mandalorian. I said this before, that I think Boba Fett might actually make a play to actually take the Mandalorian's armor and actually take his ship, and then just take off.
I like that.
We'll have to.
That's a totally Boba thing to do, because I think the expectations of a lot of fans is that Boba and the Mandalorian are going to like team up together and they're going to be awesome together, and I feel like that doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense whatsoever. Boba Fett hated Jedi. Boba Fett absolutely hated the Jedi, and he knows all about the Jedi. He knows all about the Jedi. He knows all about the Sith. He worked for Darth Vader multiple times. He knows a lot more than the Mandalorian does about what the hell is going on. And he is not a fan of the Jedi. He's never been a fan of the Jedi. Boba Fett is a villain. Okay, so even though he's a cool villain, he's a villain. And so I think there's going to be this expectation. This is what I'm kind of hoping, that there's going to be this sort of expectation they build on, that people are going to be like, oh yeah, Boba Fett's going to help the Mandalorians, to be like, no, he's not. No, he ain't. And I'm going to put something else out there. This is very speculative. And there's probably people that out there that could say, no, there's no way, that's not true. You don't know what you're talking about. That totally contradicts the lore, blah, blah, blah. But there was always an old theory, and this goes all the way back. I remember even one of the Star Wars role-playing game books talked about this, because when they did the original Star Wars role-playing game, none of this stuff was established. There was no Jango Fett. There was no Episode 2. There was none of that. They had to go with whatever was in the first 3 movies, and that was it. And then they tried to establish a world based on that lore. And I remember reading this whole thing about Boba Fett. And it was funny because the author was so non-committal about Boba Fett because he didn't know his origin story. We didn't know Boba Fett's origin story until Episode 2 came out. Up to that point, nobody knew what his story was, other than maybe George Lucas, although I feel like he kind of just made it up on the spot. But anyway, I'm just saying, nobody really knew. But there were books and things. And I remember reading the role-playing game. And one of the things I thought was interesting in that was they always acknowledged that Boba Fett wore Mandalorian armor. But what the author said in this little thing was nobody knew whether Boba Fett himself was a Mandalorian or not. And there is evidence to say he isn't. And the big evidence of that is his father, Jango Fett, who also wore the Mandalorian armor, but he used to take his helmet off all the time. So there is an interesting way that that Favreau and Filoni can go with this, if they want to go there, which I know will probably upset some fans, but I think it's kind of interesting. I think it would be kind of interesting to actually realize Boba Fett actually isn't a real Mandalorian. Maybe his father was, and he decided to break with them and break with their traditions, because he does show his face all the time. And Boba Fett ended up either stealing that armor from another Mandalorian, or, somehow building it, or somehow, taking fragments of his father's armor and somehow reforging it. But, it's kind of interesting too, because Boba Fett's armor, even when it's complete, it does seem different than the Mandalorian's armor in a lot of ways. So that's just that's some pure speculation about that. But I think it would be interesting to realize that Boba Fett essentially is not on the same team as the Mandalorian.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I've had several conversations with people actually about how I believe that Boba Fett might actually turn out to be one of the main villains of this season.
Right.
That he might actually steal the child and then attempt to take the child to Moff Gideon. And
he worked for the Empire all the time. He had no problems working for the Empire. So to me, it just wouldn't make any sense for him to team up with the Mandalorian. Maybe later, maybe if we can go through that entire journey, and maybe we can kind of like, if they want to go that route, and maybe sort of like give Boba Fett some sort of redemption, if they want to go that way, you could. But I think you have a lot more ground to cover before you do that. I don't think when they finally meet each other, it's going to be a good thing initially.
Well, and Boba Fett is such a bad dude. I think people forget this too, that those braids that he always had, those are from like Wookiee pelts or something, right, from Wookiees that he had killed. Like he's definitely not a good person at all. I mean, I always tell people he's one of my favorite Star Wars characters, but he's also, to me, one of the most notorious villains in Star Wars, if you believe the lore about him being the most feared and hated bounty hunter in the galaxy. I mean,
this is the guy Darth Vader went to.
Yeah.
This is like Darth Vader's go-to person if he had a special mission or a special job, Yeah.
And I think...
No disintegrations.
Right.
They have dealt with each other before.
Yeah.
That's my point. They have dealt with each other before. It was like, no disintegrations.
So I have a... Here's my crazy theory for where we're going to wind up at the end of this show, this season. I know this is not going to happen, but my crazy speculative theory is going to be that Boba Fett manages to get a hold of the child. Maybe he will have somehow, through hook, crook, whatever, or maybe even teaming up with the Mandalorian for one mission, he's going to somehow get his armor repaired, right? And so we're going to see Boba Fett attempting to give the child to Moff Gideon, and it's going to be Ahsoka Tano taking on Moff Gideon with the Darksaber, and we're going to get the Mandalorian versus Boba Fett in the finale. That's what I think is, and they're going to be fighting for the fate of the child. That's what I think is going to happen.
That would be pretty cool. That would be very, very cool. The other thing I could see, kind of along the same lines of what you just said, is I could see Ahsoka being a reveal for literally the last scene of this season. In other words, a situation where Boba Fett has stolen the child. He's on his way to Moff Gideon. The Mandalorian has been defeated and is in his worst position ever. And then Ahsoka shows up. I could see something like that too.
I'm really curious to see how they introduce Ahsoka. I'm a big Ahsoka Tano fan, by the way. I'm a huge Ahsoka Tano fan. So I'm really, really excited and curious to see how they're going to set all this up. Man, it's interesting because I always had those crazy fanboy theories that it'd be really cool if there was that scene where the Mandalorian's down, the child's in jeopardy, and Luke shows up, right? But I could totally see that, Eric, that it could be the same kind of scenario I've been envisioning, but it's Ahsoka that shows up.
I think that would make perfect sense.
So, yeah.
I think I think it would make a lot of sense. And
I hope we get that classic sweeping Jedi type music when she shows up too. I want to see some classic, awesome, you know what I mean? Jedi powers and the whole thing. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, it's speculation, as you said, at this point, but we'll see. There's very little information even about the next episode, as far as I've seen. Have you seen much of anything about what the next episode is even about or anything?
No, I haven't heard, seen, nor anything about the next episode at all. I have no idea what to expect. The one thing they have on IMDb is they have a picture of the Mandalorian and the child on that boat that we saw in the trailer. Right.
So it looks like it's going to be that sea episode where they end up on that boat. So I had actually speculated when this episode ended that maybe we would get something happening on Tatooine, because the Mandalorian was not shown actually leaving Tatooine. So it seemed to me that it would be kind of a natural thing to have the Mandalorian, show up at his hangar, and the next thing you know, Boba Fett is there, and he's, whatever happens, whether he initially tries to, be cool with them, or if he immediately attacks them or whatever. I thought it would be kind of interesting to do that. But all I have is this image that's on IMDb, and it shows that they're going to be on a totally different planet, which is I guess this water world where they have ships and stuff like that. So we assume they don't have that obviously on Tatooine. There's no oceans on Tatooine. It's a desert world. So they could start out that way. I don't know, but right now I don't really have any information about the second episode other than that image of the child and the Mandalorian on that ship from the trailer.
And it could always be possible too that the Mandalorian gets back to the hangar and Boba is waiting for him, but instead of immediately, kind of playing his hand, he kind of tells him who he is. He says that used to be my armor, but since my face has been exposed, I am no longer a Mandalorian. Like he could do this whole thing. He's like, but I do have information, the information that you seek. My understanding is you're, you know what I mean? And then kind of give them the information that leads them to this water world. And like I said, it's like kind of by hook, by crook, whatever, maybe he starts, kind of hatching a plan where eventually he's going to get the drop on the Mandalorian at some point. And then, like I said, just straight up just steal his ship, and maybe even potentially steal his Beskar armor at the same time. So it's interesting, and I'm going to be very curious to see how things unfold. Now, so we both talked pretty favorably about the episode. I think that so far I'm having a lot of fun with this, and I would definitely recommend people check out The Mandalorian. Would you say too, Eric, that you think this is definitely worth checking out again, especially if you liked the last season?
Yeah, it's all about Boba Fett. That's just what it's all about. And I got spoiled, by the way, before I even saw this episode. I knew Boba Fett was going to be in it, so I unfortunately, if you don't want to be spoiled, you just got to stay off the internet completely before you watch these episodes, because it's all over the place. And it was it was a big celebration. A lot of people were really excited about that. And that does kind of dovetail into something you and I were talking about off camera, which is I've seen a lot of excitement about Boba Fett's return and all that. And a lot of people seem to be really into it. But there's also rumors out there that people are saying that this season of The Mandalorian is not being that well received, that it's not that popular.
Yeah, and I'd mentioned to you that I had seen one of Doomcock's latest episodes, and he was talking about the fact that he had received information from one of his agents that that basically that the first, kind of the debut numbers for people actually watching the episode are significantly less than they had actually hoped for, and that even after the episode had been out several days, that the numbers were still, way lower than what they were expecting, and there's just a little bit of a panic. Now, again, remember, this is all speculation, this is all rumor,
right?
But I do have something to kind of corroborate this, I might add. But it's important to remember just rumor, but I have talked to several people who were very cold on this episode. And I find it interesting that, I don't know if it's just like a generational disconnect or whatever, but I feel like it's weird because I hear a lot of people sometimes complaining because something that's episodic isn't serialized. And then sometimes I hear people complaining that something is serialized, but they wished it was episodic. But it's literally the level of, it's either 100% good or 100% bad, and there's no in between is driving me crazy, because everything in life is not just all on, off, on, off, on, off. And I found it curious that so many people I talked to were kind of cold on the episode, and their reasoning for it was the fact that they wished it was more serialized. They just want to get right to the child's planet. That's like, well, wait a minute, like if you brought back Boba Fett and took us immediately to the child's planet, no offense, DC, but that's what a DC movie would do, right? And then the complaint would be like, man, that sure was awful quick. They didn't earn that payoff. Boy, they just went straight for it. Boy, they just killed him and introduced Doomsday all in one go, and they brought in Batman and Wonder Woman. Man, that's see what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing that drives me nuts, because I find that sometimes the people who celebrate what Marvel did by slowly building up to Endgame, right, over the course of 10 years, right? They took their time, they built it, and they earned that finale. right? Like they earned it. They set everything up and they earned that finale. You knew who all those characters were. You knew all their connections to all the other characters, so that when they show up on screen, you're really caught up in what's happening because you've been along with that journey. You've met all those people and you understand what led them to this moment in time. So it's earned. That finale is earned. Okay. And a lot of people celebrate that. And a lot of people are down in the DC movies because the DC movies have a bad habit. I'll pick on Green Lantern for half a second. They introduce everything in the kitchen sink and they go immediately to basically the biggest storyline that characters ever had, and they do it in one movie. Like they do it so fast and so hard that at the end, everyone's just like, well, that wasn't that they didn't earn that. And so when I heard, and you tell me, Eric, but I mean, I just heard from some people who didn't enjoy it, and it drove me nuts because I'm like going, well, wait a minute. You celebrate Marvel because they take 10 years to build at the end game, but then one episode of The Mandalorian, you're ready to walk because you don't feel like the payoff was fast enough?
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
I haven't heard a lot of negative stuff about this episode. Everything that I saw was positive. Like I said, I saw lots of excitement about Boba Fett. In my own household, I'll tell you this, which is kind of interesting. I can tell, like with my daughters, and they're younger. Baby Yoda is everything to them, and they can almost care less about the Mandalorian. And so I can tell you that I think there is some of that out there, that maybe people are like, well, this episode was just all about the Mandalorian. I want to see Baby Yoda doing stuff. I want the Force. That's always a great argument too in Star Wars too, is you have people that like Han Solo and you have people that like Luke, right? You have people that like sort of the swashbuckling smuggler and they like the blasters and they like that kind of stuff. But other people are like, no, I like Luke. I like the lightsabers. I like the Force. I like the Jedi. That's what I'm into. So I wonder if some of that might be that as well, And also because I do think Baby Yoda does steal the show quite a bit for The Mandalorian. He's the breakout star of The Mandalorian, much more so than The Mandalorian is, in my opinion. I mean, look at the merchandise. I mean, so I don't know. I think there's a lot of moving parts there, as far as why people might feel that way. I told you I had issues with the episode. I did. I had issues with the pacing, even with some of the style. It lost some style points for me, or I thought it was like a little too TV looking. But the payoff was good for me because that's what I wanted. I want Boba Fett to be in The Mandalorian. I always thought The Mandalorian should be about Boba Fett, and I'm glad he's back. And I'm glad that they're making that connection and they are bringing him back. So, for me, that's the big payoff for me. That's what I like. I also do like the hybrid style. I call it hybrid style that Mandalorian does because it is not, you're right, it's not 100% serialized. It's not 100% episodic. They mix the two, and I like that because I'm almost sick of the serialized stuff at this point. I'm almost to the point that I would rather just be episodic all the time. But I do want to see what happens to the child because, like millions of other people, I love Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda is awesome to me. So.
Well, that's cool. It was just weird because when I heard what Doomcock was saying, and then I've heard from several people who I talk to about movies and TV shows and stuff, and we don't usually have very lengthy conversations, but there was a lot of excitement, about this episode of The Mandalorian, and of course the reintroduction of Boba Fett. And so I was curious to see what other people were kind of thinking, and then I was kind of surprised to hear so many people kind of cold on the episode. And then when I saw, Doomcock talking about his agent had told him that the viewership numbers were much lower than they were expecting, I was sort of like, wow, that's just crazy to me. So, and then
I actually did try to check if the Nielsen's had ratings yet for this time period.
Yeah.
And unfortunately they don't. The streaming ratings for the Nielsen's, they're like a month behind, which is kind of disappointing. Yeah. Because they're supposed to be weekly. So I don't understand what Nielsen's doing exactly, but I did try to check. I even went on their website to see if I could find any numbers for last week, and they're just not there. So incidentally, the last numbers I did see, it was just dominated by Netflix. It's like Netflix is like 9 things. The only thing that was not Netflix was The Boys. from Amazon. That was the only thing that was not a Netflix show. And a lot of them are actually, I remember the last time you and I talked about some of the Nielsen ratings, for streaming. A lot of that stuff is like old stuff, like they're old shows, that are not even, it's not even new stuff. It's kind of interesting what's going on there.
Well, it's interesting because my wife and I, when we typically have stuff on these days, because I'm so busy, I do not want to get wrapped up in a new show unless I can actually sit down and focus on it. And so since we're looking for things to have on, but it needs to be stuff that either one of us can just walk away from it and come back to it. The things that we have on are not stuff that we would normally watch. Like, for example, like late at night when I'm in the studio working right now, I've mentioned this before, I'm still watching a regular show. And when my wife and I are watching television, the last several days, it's been Golden Girls of all things, all Golden Girls reruns. Because they're kind of funny, and
I used to watch Golden Girls with my mom all the time when it was first.
Yeah,
I used to watch it with my mom all the time.
And so I'm finding just the things that we, and I talked before, a while back, like I was rewatching Justified because I love Justified, and so a lot of the stuff that I am often watching, before that it was old, classic Star Trek. So I can understand people's viewing habits being unconventional because my viewing habits are definitely unconventional, to say the least. But it's interesting too, talking about the connection to Boba Fett, because I don't own a lot of Star Wars collectibles anymore, because I've kind of gotten rid of them kind of off and on over the years, and the few things I have left are things that I really, really like. So I've showed it before on the show, like I've got my prototype Boba Fett where he's in the all white, because he was originally they were thinking he would be like an older style stormtrooper, right, from the Clone Wars era.
Cool. Yeah, very cool.
So I have that. I have my original Boba Fett action figure from when I was a kid. I have my die-cast metal Millennium Falcon from when I was a kid. And then I have remember they had those little play sets that had the little die-cast metal figures?
Yeah, I had a couple of those.
Yeah, I had the one where it was Luke and Vader battling on that little platform where he cuts off his hand.
Yeah, they had a set of Bespin. I think that was the only Bespin sets that were ever made, were those ones, where never together like Bespin sets, which was kind of cool. Yeah, I remember. I had a lot of the ones for Hoth. I had a lot.
Yeah, it's so dark when I think about it now. The fact that they had a play set for kids where there was a severed Luke Skywalker with him hanging on the edge of the thing, because that's what the little die-cast figure would do. You'd hang it on the end of it, and he would be holding on, and you could have Vader at the other end, like he was, join me, and I would complete your training, like that whole thing, It was weird that, because in hindsight, I realized that as a kid, that's probably kind of weird and dark that they, had tortured, hand-severed Luke as a play set for a kid. But I still have my Darth Vader from that. The one where he's got the lightsaber and his cape is flowing behind him. It's kind of like that image from the poster where you see the two of them clashing swords, So I still have my original little metal, and I just don't have that many things, but it's like most of the stuff that I have is Boba Fett related. So I'm very excited to see Boba Fett back, but it is important for people to not forget Boba Fett is a villain.
Right.
Like, he is not a good guy. So you should expect Boba Fett to do at times the worst possible stuff he possibly can to get the upper hand. He may steal, he may lie, he may cheat, he may murder people. He may sell someone into slavery, like whatever he's got to, because they talk about that too with Boba Fett's backstory, that he used to run Wookiees and sell them into slavery and stuff. I mean, he is not a good dude. So while I'm excited to see him come back, I do have a feeling that we're going to get a Mandalorian versus Boba Fett at some point. Once Boba Fett shows his true colors and we see how evil he really truly can be. I do think it's going to come down to the Mandalorian versus Boba Fett. And I'm going to be a little torn because Boba Fett's definitely going to have it coming. But I'm going to be a little torn still, So
I want to see it, and I actually want to see the Mandalorian get his ass kicked. That's what I want to see. I want to see Boba Fett just sweep the floor with him. That's what I want to see. That's what I want.
There's also that possibility, just to slightly tweak what I said before, there is that possibility where we could see, Boba Fett, like you said, just mop the floor with the Mandalorian. It looks really bad, and he's going to take the child to Moff Gideon, and from amidst all the smoke and the debris and the sparks everywhere, out comes walking Ahsoka Tano, and it's Ahsoka Tano versus Boba Fett.
Yep.
So and that could go that route too. I'd be down for that as well. So either way, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And Boba Fett's got a lot of bad blood for Jedis.
That's
like you said point. Before.
Yeah, remember that. That's important to remember. Boba Fett hates the Jedi for a very personal reason. He hates the Jedi. They killed his dad. Never forget that. So he does not like the Jedi. I don't think he would have any interest to help the child at all.
Right. Yeah, I think that as well. Very cool. So we're about 121. Wow, we've been going quite a while talking about the Mandalorian, but this is a fun episode. It sets up a lot of fun stuff. There's a lot of possibilities and potential. So very excited to see where we go from here.
Episode 1 of the second season. So
yeah, cool. All right. So do we want to go ahead and segue over into doing pop culture?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind putting the banner up just real quick, and I'll set it up.
Second there.
Awesome. So here in the pop culture news segment, we talk about anything that's interesting that's either piqued my interest or Eric's interest, something that's happening in the world of pop culture news. But at the end of the day, we hope that it's something that you will find worthwhile of discussion. So I don't have a lot for this particular episode. I've got just a couple things. Do you want to go ahead and go first, Eric? Or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I've got a few things. So yeah, let me go. I'll go ahead and start. And,
all right, cool.
We can kind of just go back and forth. So since we were just talking about the Mandalorian, and we have been talking a little bit more about collectibles and stuff, I definitely wanted to show this. I actually wanted to show this last week, but due to time, I didn't. And I think this is really, really pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and blow up the screen a little bit. So I've talked about this before, this Hasbro Pulse. This is where Hasbro will release a lot of items. They even do almost like crowdfunding type stuff, where they'll say, hey, like they did Jabba's his barge on here. They've done all sorts of crazy stuff on this thing. So my understanding is this, though, will actually be available in stores. So these are the Mandalorian Retro Collection. And this is the Mandalorian himself. It's pretty cool, I think. If you take a look at it there, you can see he's got like the vinyl cape, like the original Kenner Star Wars action figures. And you can just see the way that he's designed. It's definitely got very much sort of that very sort of Kenner, original 80s, kind of even, late 70s feel to the design of the character. Have you seen these, Dave?
I had seen those, and that this is the one thing I've seen so far that really had me thinking, man, I'm going to end up buying Star Wars toys again, because this is the one thing. Because when I saw this, I was like, okay, this is really cool. I dig this.
Me too. I like it a lot. I really like the whole retro styling that they did. You can see some of the other figures here too, some of the other characters. This, of course, is the one based on Carl Weathers' character, and you can see he's got the vinyl. He's got the vinyl cloak. It's not cloth. It's definitely very, very, very retro, but it also looks really good, I think, from a modern standpoint too. I mean, I think they did a good job. They even have these characters that have passed that I think a lot of people would actually like to have. I actually would, because I think this was a cool character that spoiler, obviously didn't make it to the second season. I think they did a really good job on these things. I'm a big fan of IG-11. I thought that he had the most interesting character story arc of any of the characters from season 1. I really liked his story arc. I thought it was really well done. His droid characters have always been really important in Star Wars, and he was no exception. So I wouldn't mind having that character. And then we also have the version here of Cara Dune, which I think they did a really good job on her. Definitely, you know, it's kind of neat because a lot of the Kenner stuff, especially the early stuff, really did not look like the actors very much, but these look like the actors, you know, even though it's got that retro styling. I think they definitely look like the actors. They did a really good job on these.
And yeah, I think it's really cool. Like I said, this is the one thing that really had me, you know, getting ready to pull the trigger, because I was like going, okay, well these are really cool. So
yeah, I definitely want these. I want the full collection. And you got Moff Gideon here, and doesn't he just totally look like Darth Vader?
Yeah,
like, he totally looks, and he even has that old style for the lightsaber. The lightsaber retracts into his arm.
yeah.
Isn't that some attention to detail there?
Yeah.
You know? So it's pretty cool. You know, these are pretty neat. I have to say, I definitely think it would be cool to get some of these. So yeah, I just thought it would be cool to look at these, and I thought that you would appreciate them as well, because we have been talking a little bit more about collectibles on the show. Unfortunately, the one thing that really sucks is these are not coming out until next year. They're not coming out until July of next year. You can pre-order them now. They're $10 a piece, so that's not a terrible price as far as a lot of these collectibles go, because a lot of these, especially these like premium action figures they're coming out with, they're getting really expensive. And so these are fairly reasonably priced at $10 a pop. And my understanding is, even though, yes, you can pre-order them on the Hasbro site, my understanding is they are going to be available on stores. I don't know that for sure, but that's my understanding.
Well, that sounds really cool. No, I think it's really neat. I'm just surprised they're not doing the what they call it, the early. What was that when they did the notorious? Oh darn, what was it called? I can't remember what's called. Remember they did it was the certificate that you could send in to redeem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For the early bird special. That's what it was. I'm surprised they didn't do that with these. I mean, I know they're kind of doing the Kickstarter thing and you can pre-order them, but I'm kind of surprised they didn't go ahead and do the whole early bird special kind of idea. So
it's similar. I mean, obviously, because
but
technology, you can just pre-order it, so it's prepaid. It's the same idea, you know. So
I would have gone
to deliver it to you.
I would have taken it even a step further. So like there'd be like a 4-pack and it'd have like the illustrated art, you know, like the old style, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And come with the peg stand and the whole bit, you know. And maybe that's the only way you can get the peg stand, is if you get like the 4 figures, you know, that come in the early bird gift set.
Yeah.
I would have gone all super retro on that. But that's still really fun, because I'd seen those and I was like, damn it. It's like they're going to get me back into buying Star Wars toys, because those look really cool. Because I love and I've seen some images actually of the packaging too, and the packaging is really fun because it really looks like those old school. And the thing that's kind of neat too is that it is that classic old school, but it's new characters at the same time. That's the thing that makes it kind of fun. So, because they have, I think just recently they have been reissuing a lot of the classic, you know, Star Wars toys in the retro packaging, but I do like the idea of them doing it with the Mandalorian.
And they have introduced a few new characters as well that they never had made before. Like for instance, when they did the Star Wars retro collection for the original Star Wars, they came out with a Moff Tarkin figure, but you had to get the Star Wars board game to get that one. I know there were some fans that were kind of upset about that, because they wanted Moff Tarkin, but they didn't necessarily want the board game. But and then I think they did another one with the Empire, you know, with a lot of the Empire figures. And I think the way, if I remember it right, the original Star Wars one, that was like a Target exclusive, and then the Empire stuff was a Walmart exclusive. So this one you can just order off the website. So that's kind of nice too, that you don't have to necessarily go to one store or the other.
Cool. So if you don't mind, I'll go next. Do you mind sharing my screen? So for my pop culture this week, I thought it was interesting. Actually, yesterday was technically Godzilla Day. Did you know it was Godzilla Day?
I had no idea it was Godzilla Day.
Godzilla Day was yesterday. So I know most of those of you who are Retro Rogues fans, you're going to know who Godzilla is, but I'll just do a brief summary here. So Godzilla is a 1954 Japanese kaiju film directed by Ishiro Honda with special effects by Eiji Tsusubara. Produced and directed by Toho Studios, it is the first film in the Godzilla franchise. The film stars Akira Takarada, Momoko, probably saying this incorrectly, Kochi, Ahiko Hirata, and Takashi Shimura, with Haro Nakajima and Katsumi Tezuka as Godzilla. In the film, Japan's authorities deal with the sudden appearance of a giant monster whose attacks trigger fears of nuclear holocaust during post-war Japan. So this image I picked here is I colored it, colorized a little bit because the original film is black and white, but this is from Godzilla or Gojira from 1954. But yeah, Godzilla turned 66. Isn't that crazy? 66. And they were doing kind of some things to celebrate it, but it didn't seem to get as much fanfare as I think they were probably hoping for. And I think it's because the way they kind of packaged it. The reason I didn't pull up a website and read a news article, because it was just kind of like hype for tie-in merchandising things they were doing. You know what I mean? And I felt like to me, it didn't seem like it was much of a celebration of the character. So I thought it'd be interesting to just talk briefly. Do you remember the first time you saw a Godzilla movie, Eric?
Not specifically, because I remember Godzilla movies being on after Saturday morning cartoons. I remember they would have Godzilla movies. There's also some, there's also some other monster movies out of Japan that are not Godzilla. So I would get confused because I was pretty small when they were doing this. So a lot of times I would think I was watching a Godzilla movie, and it wasn't a Godzilla movie. It was like some other, Japanese monster movie that was, similar, obviously, a similar type of format, because there were a lot of Godzilla knockoffs. I don't know if people realize that, how many Godzilla knockoffs there actually were, because there were a lot. And but they also would show the Godzilla movies as well. So I just remember them being part of that Saturday morning experience because they would show a lot of those types of movies. There were other types of movies they would show as well. But I just remember there being a lot of the Godzilla movies growing up that they would show. And so I would just see them on TV. And then probably my most coherent memory of Godzilla is actually Godzilla 1985, the American movie. The sequel to the original Godzilla. The American version, by the way, because they added some scenes to the American version, and then they were able to follow up with that, with 1985. And we got that on, we rented that on VHS and watched that. And I remember actually liking that movie quite a bit, even though I think it was kind of a bomb, but I liked it. I really enjoyed Godzilla 1985.
I remember seeing my first Godzilla. I think the first. I just remember seeing some of the movies and not quite being sure what I was seeing, and they used to do the same thing where I grew up too, Eric, where it was kind of like after Saturday morning cartoons, they'd start running like these just random afternoon movies, and also too around this same time that I was introduced to Godzilla was the first time I saw Johnny Sacco and his flying robot. And they had taken some of the episodes of the show and actually cut them together like in 2-hour movies. They used to do this all the time back in the day. You never hear of anyone doing it anymore. Well, I guess they kind of did a Battlestar, but that's a long story. I'm talking about the new Battlestar. I know they obviously did that with the original Battlestar Galactica. But it was interesting to me that there was just all this kind of material and different kinds of things. But I remember Godzilla was kind of the preeminent. But I remember the first one that I really remembered, I was definitely watching a Godzilla movie, was when he actually fought Mechagodzilla, which was the robot Godzilla.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And I really liked that one a lot.
I like Mechagodzilla, yeah.
Yeah, and so I always had a fondness for Godzilla. And ever since then, I've seen just about every version of Godzilla that's ever done, including the newer ones. And I just thought it'd be fun just to take a minute and just talk a little bit, because I didn't know if the Rogues Gallery might enjoy talking about their first experiences with Godzilla, but I guess it looks like everyone is too busy talking about that election thing that happened, which I desperately needed a friggin' break from because I'm sick of it. So
Jane mentioned also earlier, she said she forgot about the time change.
Oh, time change, yeah.
Because obviously Arizona does
too.
not change, and we broadcast from Arizona. So that does affect things as well because, there is a time difference now. Arizona doesn't change, everybody else does. So, technically we're on earlier for everybody.
Well, that's a good point. So no, I just thought it'd be fun to bring up Godzilla since it was Godzilla Day yesterday, and that Godzilla had turned 66. So happy birthday to Godzilla and happy Godzilla Day. So that's my first pop culture.
I'm curious. Do you like the newer ones like Godzilla King of the Monsters? We watched that recently at my house. One of my daughters wanted to watch that, and we watched that fairly recently. Are you a fan of the new Godzilla movies?
I like them. I think they're pretty fun. The last one was, man, it was just a lot going on, because they tried to. It felt like a DC movie. It felt like they were trying to cram everything in. But I enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, I own it, so that's something to be said. And I like the other movie too, the one that had the guy from Breaking Bad in it. I know that Godzilla doesn't show up in that one very much, but I still enjoyed that one too. So, like I said, are
you looking forward to the Godzilla versus King Kong?
I am, and I'm not. The reason I say I am and I'm not because I am, but I'm not sure how they're going to do this, where they're going to make the fans happy, because I really don't want to see Godzilla lose, and I don't really want to see King Kong lose. And I enjoyed it. Was it Kong of Skull Island or whatever it was, that movie that had Sam Jackson? I kind of
see that one.
I kind of enjoyed it. I liked it. I liked it better than their attempt to reintroduce King Kong, the Peter Jackson movie, because the Peter Jackson movie just had some weird beats for me, and that's the only way I could explain it. I used to make fun of that movie by calling it Monkeys on Ice, which was unnecessarily harsh in hindsight. But there was just some beats in that movie that struck me as kind of weird. You reach a point in some of these movies where they try to humanize the monster too much, and that's when it makes it kind of weird, because you start attaching motivations to the creature that maybe it doesn't really have. And it just makes it kind of a little too strange. And I felt like they just went a little too far with the Peter Jackson King Kong movie. But I like the other one. And I'm excited to see how they're going to tie this together. And, of all the things they've tried to do, this is the one that it looks like they might actually pull off. Because, Universal had these grand scheme things. They were going to take all their classic monsters and they were going to, introduce the dark universe. And boy, that didn't work. So the fact that they've been able to get so many films out of the Godzilla franchise and then King Kong and then connect them, the way that they've done in the newer movies, if they can pull it off, it might be fun. I don't know if they're going to be as wildly remembered as the classic films, but I enjoyed the last one. I thought it was fun. What about you? You said that you just recently had watched it. What did you think of it?
It's the same thing I think about a lot of the Transformers movies, which I do enjoy some of them. I actually enjoyed Bumblebee. I thought Bumblebee was pretty good. But a lot of the Transformers movies, they're off-putting to me because I really don't care about the human characters that much. Right. And I want to see the Transformers. I want to see this Transformers fight. That's what I came there for. I think that's what everybody came there for. I want to see the big giant robots fight each other. And the other thing is, with Transformers, the Transformers themselves are actually dynamic characters, unlike the monsters and stuff like that. You actually can do a lot with them, but they just choose not to for some reason because, well, I know why, because they want to show the stupid human actors and, they pay a lot of money for them and all that stuff. And I felt the same way with the Godzilla stuff. It's like, I really don't care about this woman. I don't really care about her kid. I really don't care about the guy. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't care about any of them. I was like, I want to see Godzilla destroy stuff. And, that's what I want to see. That's why I came here. I want to see masses of, troops and stuff like that going at Godzilla. And, that's what I want, and I don't know. Maybe that's not what other people like. Now they want to see all the drama and whatever. Okay, maybe that's what people like.
Well, they did do a better job, and they did try much harder in the last Godzilla movie to show us more of the monsters and the battles, and to actually not spend too much time with the humans. So I do think they did do a much better job in the last one. And to be honest with you, I think by the time they get to Godzilla versus Kong, which I think technically is already finished, by the time they actually get to Godzilla versus Kong, there's enough material right there that they're going to have to deal with just with Godzilla, Kong, and the ancillary monsters that it kind of come with both. You know what I mean? That I don't think they're going to spend a whole lot of time dealing with the humans, because they've got an awful lot of stuff they need to get done. So I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, obviously the humans need to bridge and explain what we're seeing. You know what I mean? Unless they can find a way to actually have the monsters communicate in a way that makes, perfectly clear sense to us, right? But we'll see. We'll see how this all ends. Like I said, I like the first one with I can't remember his name, the guy from Breaking Bad. I like that movie. I own it, and then I bought the last one too because I like that one as well. But it's interesting to me because when I talk about, like, I don't know if these movies will be as fondly remembered as the other ones. And I'm just talking about, like, a lot of people didn't really care for that remake that they made by the people that did Stargate and Independence Day when they made their Godzilla remake. But the problem with that movie for me, more than the redesign, was the fact that eventually it feels like it turns into, like, a sequel to Jurassic Park, and I always felt like that was the part of the movie that didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I even saw that movie, to be honest with you.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, this wasn't on my radar. Jane mentions, he says, I saw it when I was young. I think she's talking about some of the original stuff. It says back then, this was something that was not normally seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it was that common, especially back then, because a lot of this stuff was brand new. So, right. I mean, no one had seen anything like any of this stuff now. I mean, now we've had so many interpretations, reinterpretations. We've seen people do spoofs on it. We've seen people, do their own version of it, their own takes, I mean, because, some people could allude to the fact that the crate dragon that we were just talking about, the Mandalorian, how that creature in its own sort of way, while not directly hearkening back to Godzilla, it does hearken back to this time period, when they first introduced the idea of the giant, creatures, you know what I mean? And the threat that they kind of pose, between Godzilla and them, and a lot of these movies from this time period where the nuclear radiation is going to turn everything into a giant monster, a lot of these things owe their, sometimes inspiration to films like Godzilla.
I would say obviously the one interesting, exception to that would be King Kong. You know what I mean? King Kong,
that's true. Yeah.
Before Godzilla. So it's kind of interesting that they are putting those two together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and then Jackie's in the house and she's saying hi. That's glad to have
Hello
you in the Rogues Gallery as we're talking about some pop culture news here.
Yeah, and it's important to remember too that well, no, I think you said it pretty eloquently. No, yeah. But anyhow, I just thought it'd be interesting to mention Godzilla. Like I said, since yesterday was Godzilla Day, and Godzilla turned 66.
By some other things, so
yeah, Godzilla Day on the midst of a potentially contested election. Yeah, those two things they're not like peanut butter and chocolate. They don't seem to go well together. So yeah, Godzilla Day got totally overshadowed by this other thing that was going on. So
yeah, that happened.
Maybe they could have picked a different day for Godzilla Day. So
yeah, that would have been smart. Maybe they thought they were doing some clever counter programming there that didn't quite work out. Huh?
No, didn't work out. Try again. But anyhow, I thought it was still fun to mention it. So
very cool.
All right. So what else did you have next for pop culture, Eric?
Well, I have let's see. I have some follow up on one of the stories we were talking about last week. And this is just rumor, but it's good rumor, so I thought I would just bring it up because I've been wondering about this. And this is a site called We Got This Covered. They do a lot of rumor stuff, but they do get it right sometimes. So I felt like, yeah, it's worth talking about because they do sometimes get it right. So this is a rumor that I've been hoping for. So it says Val Kilmer reportedly returning for Willow Disney Plus series. We did talk about last week that there is going to be a Willow series on Disney Plus. At least they've announced it. They haven't actually started filming yet, but it has been confirmed by both. Oh my goodness, Warwick Davis, right, who played Willow, and then also by Ron Howard. He's going to be involved with it as well. So it says back in January, cult classic Willow was announced to be getting an upcoming sequel show on Disney Plus. The 1988 Ron Howard movie boasts a story by George Lucas, and after a somewhat rocky release, Silly picked up a dedicated fan base on home video. It says details are thin on the ground about what the new Willow will consist of, but so far as we know, that a Star Wars Solo story writer, John Caston, is on script duty, and original star Warwick Davis will appear. Ron Howard won't direct, but will be involved, and that it will be set after the film, so it is an actual sequel. It says, now our sources, and it says the same ones that told the She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel shows were coming to Disney Plus well before they were announced, have informed us that Val Kilmer is in early talks to return as heroic former knight Mad Mardigan. Kilmer has famously had a rocky few years off screen, having battled throat cancer and undergone a procedure on his trachea that affected his voice and makes him short of breath. Despite those negative effects, the operation saved his life, and he's resumed acting. In fact, Kilmer will next appear in Top Gun Maverick, where his iconic Iceman character is now an admiral. So I thought this was kind of interesting because, yes, it's rumor, but this is something that I've been, really anticipating. I am a big fan of Willow. I saw it in the theater. I did not have to see it on home video. I went out in the theater and saw it. I've always been a fan of that movie. I've always enjoyed it. I've always wanted a sequel. I've always thought that world could be explored a lot more. I was very happy to hear that Warwick Davis is going to be involved with the television show, and I'm just hoping that there's room for Val Kilmer. And this article is saying that there very likely will be. So I don't know what you think about this story, Dave. I don't know how much you're into Willow, but I thought it was interesting.
No, I will be excited to check it out when it's ready. When they actually have the show. I mean, maybe we might be able to, talk about some of the episodes here on the show, So I'm looking forward to it. I was actually, I think I mentioned it last episode, my camera's off, but I recently completely redid the studio, rearranging everything, setting up differently. And one of the things I ran across is I took all my Starlog magazines and I got them kind of all together in one little spot. And one of the few Starlog magazines that I still have that I've kept since I was a kid, I actually had a big write-up on Willow in it. So, I'm excited to see it, and I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it. I'm a Val Kilmer fan. I've talked before about how much I love Batman Forever. I was quoting Tombstone earlier in this same episode. I love Tombstone. It's one of my favorite movies. I love Top Gun. Top Gun's like literally Tombstone and Top Gun are in my top 10 movies of like all time. So I'm very excited to see Val Kilmer return and pretty much do anything. I saw what was that movie he did with Kurt Russell? Where they were in Africa and they were being hunted by the lion. Ghosts of. It was a really cool movie. It was really interesting. So I'm always down for anything when Kilmer does anything. Matter of fact, back in the day, I had an actual poster actually for The Saint in my studio for the longest time because I thought the poster was so cool. But I actually really enjoyed the movie too.
Yeah, that's a great movie. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, so I'm a big Kilmer fan, so I'm down. So
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know how physically, his health problems have affected him in terms of his ability to act and especially his ability to be physical, So, I think it would be wise if they actually tried to use that a little bit, because it would be kind of interesting. You think of a character like Mad Mardigan, and how would he deal with the fact that, maybe he's not as physically fit as he used to be. Maybe he's not in good shape. Maybe he's, got, you could actually use that in the story if you wanted to, if they want to go that route. I don't know. Maybe he can still do some of that stuff. I don't know. It's hard to say because unfortunately we haven't seen him in anything very recently, and we should have seen Top Gun, I think, by now. But of course that got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. So we don't even know really what his role is going to be in there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Because I was really, really looking forward to Top Gun Maverick. So, no, I mean, like I said, I'm excited. I'm down. So, I'll be very happy to see what Kilmer's got going on. So I'm down. I'm down.
Well, I'm just hoping he's in it.
It's weird too, because if you go to I was looking at his IMDb just out of curiosity, and it's like the 4 films he's known for. Like, I think The Saint is the only one I was that terribly familiar with. I was surprised at like Batman Forever, Top Gun, was it Real Genius? Like, I was surprised that like none of the movies I think of Kilmer, Tombstone, were even featured like as his top 4 known for. It was like 3 films I'd never heard of, and then The Saint. Because to me, because when I think of Val Kilmer, I think of Tombstone, Top Gun, then I would think of Willow. And then the 4th one, I personally want to say Batman Forever, because, he was in so much of the marketing for that. But I mean, he like Real Genius is like a cult classic. A lot of people love that movie. Obviously The Saint, he's definitely known for The Saint, but I was just kind of surprised of the 4 films on IMDb they were showcasing, because I was like going, I haven't heard of 3 of these, so
that's crazy. Yeah. Not having Tombstone is like unforgivable. I mean, that's the title of his autobiography. I'll Be Your Huckleberry is the title of his autobiography. So not having that is unforgivable.
Yeah. Cause I think still that is his most, when I think of quintessential iconic Val Kilmer roles, I think of Doc Holliday from Tombstone, because he breathes.
That's my point.
Again, he breathes so much life into that.
I'll Be Your Huckleberry. So
yeah.
So,
well, there you go. Very well, interesting. Cool. All right, so I guess I'm up next. Let me see if I can do this without accidentally showing. Let's see here. I'm having issues because I need to set up a second screen here. So if you wouldn't mind showing my screen, Eric. So for my second pop culture news story, I thought this would be interesting to bring this up. This was kind of running rampant yesterday. And this is off of a Cinema Blend. This is by Corey Chizola. Apologies, I'm definitely not saying that right. And I saw this reported all over the place. I just picked this particular site just kind of at a random. But it says Snyder Cut, why Zack Snyder's Justice League trailer was pulled from YouTube. Did you hear about this?
I did. I did hear a little bit about this. I didn't hear the details. I think actually literally all I saw was a headline like that.
So it says here, as far as superhero movies go, none have a wilder road than Justice League. Zack Snyder's DC blockbuster hit, let's see. Let me start over. Let's start that over again, Dave. As far as superhero movies go, none have had a wilder road than Justice League. Zack Snyder's DC blockbuster hit theaters back in 2017, although it was greatly altered thanks to Joss Whedon's reshoots. The filmmaker's original vision for the project is finally coming together on HBO Max next year, but the Snyder Cut has already hit a speed bump. Namely, because the teaser trailer that debuted at DC's Fandom has been taken down. After years of complaining and crowdfunding for the Snyder Cut, DC fans were finally treated to some new footage, thanks to the teaser trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League this summer. But months later, the trailer was taken down, and it's about the music presented in that tease. We learned this from THR's Aaron Couch, who posted, HBO Max has removed August's trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League over music right issues, but it will likely go back up on YouTube once the issue is resolved.
Jeez.
Well, there you have it. The Snyder Cut trailer is currently missing from YouTube, at least for the time being, and with the added information that this was due to music rights, the writing is on the wall regarding exactly why the exciting footage was pulled from the internet. It says, after all, Zack Snyder has a relationship with the song he used. So you guys can obviously go over here to Cinema Blend if you want to read more about this. This is, and I've talked about this before, and I'd worry about it, but I don't think anyone's watching on YouTube right now. Let's be honest. So, so I, as everyone knows, I have this hate relationship with YouTube because of all the anguish and the pain they caused me when I had my other show that I eventually just pulled down off of YouTube because, I'd spend days putting something together, and then I would upload it, and I'd finally get it on there, and I'd do everything just the way you're supposed to do, so hopefully people would find it and enjoy the show. We weren't even monetizing the show. I'd get it all ready, and I'd put it up on the internet, and then I'd go to bed to get some rest, and I'd get up the next morning and be all excited to see maybe 3 people watched it and someone liked it, right? And that's what I'm dreaming about. And then all of a sudden I get awoken at 2:30 a.m. because my phone goes off. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with my phone? I go over and I look at it and I get an email. YouTube has copyright struck or flagged your video and demonetized it, and it's blocked. Why? Like, this used to happen every single time. And then when they came down with the COPA thing, I was just like, you know what, screw it. I'll just pull the show down. So that's why you can't watch the old show. They even, as Eric is well aware, we mentioned this before when we were doing the 24-hour event, they even blocked the part 2 of the 24-hour event because we were showing the episodes in it. It just absolutely just drives me berserk. It's like I paid for the rights for the intro music and everything. They flagged me for that. It's like, I bought that music. What the hell are you talking about? So it's absolutely maddening, all the nonsense that goes on. We had earlier this year during a comic event, a Comic-Con at Home event, where YouTube blocked CBS All Access Discovery Panel over copyright issues. It's CBS All Access. It's the stars of the freaking show on there. They're trying to get people excited for the next season of Discovery, and YouTube blocks it because they're all like, oh, well, copyright violations and such. And then so they turn around and they do this, and I'm pretty sure DC had every right to use, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah or whatever in the trailer because, DC's used it for all kinds of stuff. So I can't imagine that Warner Brothers would literally cut a trailer for a movie and then put music in it that they didn't have the rights to. This is just stupid. This is so stupid. This is that stupid bot out of control. And I think it's hilarious that major Hollywood productions are being hit with it, just like regular people are being hit with it. So you said you'd heard some about this, Eric, but what do you think? Isn't this just crazy?
Yeah, it builds upon a theme that we've talked about many times on this show about, well, it's why we don't put music on the show. Well, we're so reluctant to put music on the show. We've even had concerns about the timer, the counter that we put at the beginning of the show, which is provided for free by StreamYard. That's where that counter comes from, that countdown. And it has a little piece of music that goes along with it. And, you and I have talked about that. We even get worried about using that they're going to do something to us or ban us or whatever. We'll get shadow banned or, any myriad of problems because of that. So, yeah, it gets ridiculous. It really does. The one thing is it's quote unquote easy, right? Because, that's one thing that a computer can detect is like, hey, you plug in copyrighted music right into a system, and then it should be able to, flag it immediately and say, yep, that's copyrighted. Of course, what it can't tell you is whether that person has access to that copyright or not. That's what the algorithm can't do, but it can flag the music. That's the point. So that's why it does that, and it's a shame. It's just like everything else. And then of course YouTube, of course, has said, many times that due to the pandemic, we've got less actual people reviewing this stuff. Which I'm like, how does that make any sense? So you fired people, I guess, because of the pandemic. Is that what you're telling me? When you have way more people viewing this stuff than had ever been viewing this stuff, we know that, because people are stuck at home. What, your reviewers can't review this stuff from home? Is that what you're trying to tell us? It gets silly. It gets ridiculous.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I thought this would be just interesting to bring up because I've talked about it kind of before, and I just thought it's hilarious that the YouTube bot that identifies music, it just flags just the randomest stuff. And then, obviously, I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure Warner Brothers had the rights to use that music in their trailer. And I just think it's funny that they blocked a Warner Brothers trailer for a major release, just like a few months ago or a month or so ago, they blocked that panel actually from CBS All Access,
Yeah.
And it's the people that own all the rights to Star Trek Discovery. You know what I mean? Not just some of them. CBS owns all the rights to Discovery. Exactly. And they blocked them, because they're in violation of their own copyright somehow. So stupid. Stupid.
It is.
So anyhow.
Yeah, it's a beast. There's no doubt about it. It's a complete and total beast.
Yeah.
Let's see, I think I have one more pop culture. So
cool.
I did want to mention this. I put it out on a tweet, so I want to make sure that I at least cover it. And this is something I'm not sure that you had seen much about, Dave, because we talked about it a little bit off the air. But this is also from We've Got This Covered. And it said, first look at Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai teases Gizmo's return. So I didn't even know this was a thing. And I had no idea this was even happening. So it says, despite its enduring popularity, we've somehow been without a new entry into the Gremlins franchise since 1990. But that's about to change as an animated prequel series to the classic 1984 Christmas movie is coming. Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai has been in the works for a while. So you may be aware that it's due to be set in 1920s Shanghai, following the adventures of the old Chinatown shopkeeper from the film as a young boy with Gizmo by his side. Earlier today, we finally got our first look at the upcoming show as in an article on the many children's and family series heading to HBO Max. Variety shared the below image depicting 10-year-old Sam Wing and Gizmo walking through a Shanghai street. So here is the picture. I don't know how well you can see it. It is a little bit, it's a little hard to see, especially Gizmo, but I think you can see him there, Dave. So you can see they're in the middle of an alley or a street. Their backs are facing us. We can see the little boy, and then you can see Gizmo by his ears. This is the little blob down there at the bottom with the big ears. What's really interesting to me is I had not heard about this at all. I had no idea that this was a thing, that this was coming out. This is actually part of a bigger article that we got you covered was referencing from Variety, where they were talking about how HBO Max is trying to develop all this children's programming. And this is part of it. So did you know anything about this Gremlins cartoon that's coming out?
I had heard something like a little while ago, but I hadn't really kind of followed that. I don't know, for lack of a better term, like I hadn't followed that, rabbit hole to wherever it was going to go. But I had heard a little bit about it, But I was kind of waiting until they actually released something official, because, you know, sometimes, as you've even seen on the show, like, you know, those of you who are watching, you know, sometimes they'll announce something and it gets so retooled by the time that it actually debuts, it's not even the same thing. Or sometimes they'll announce something and it gets stuck in development hell and it never actually moves forward. So I had heard a little bit about this, but I was waiting until something kind of more official came out that showed that, yes, it's actually moving forward and actually, you know, it actually is being made.
Well, there it is. There's the first image from the show, and that's from the showrunner from his Twitter account. So it is official. They are doing something with it. I think this is basically concept art. So it's still kind of at that stage. I don't know if they've actually done any actual animation at this point. But yeah, they are proceeding forward on this, and this is apparently something that HBO Max is taking seriously.
Well, let's hope that HBO Max takes it a little bit more seriously, and you know, they develop it in a manner that if it's something that people enjoy, that clicks with people, that they'll get a chance to continue to, you know, explore that world and enjoy it. Unlike what, you know, happened with Netflix and The Dark Crystal. You know, they give us one really amazing season, and I'm excited to see more of it. And they go, it's too expensive. Ratings are what we needed. We're done.
Well, that does make an interesting point, because are you disappointed at all that it's not live action and it's not using, you know, the puppets?
I'm not, because like I said, I look at what happened with Dark Crystal and what's happened with a few other productions. It's like if they sink, depending upon how they put this together, if they sink too much money into it, then the chances are greater that, you know, it may not live beyond like a first season. So, you know, the benefits of doing this like as an animated CGI production, the first one is the fact that once the assets are done, even if they decide to retool things kind of here and there, that's going to cost a lot less money than having to, you know, set dress something or set something up for live action. You know what I mean? So maybe if it is popular and people do like it, maybe it has a chance to live beyond, you know, a season one, and maybe get like a season 2 or a season 3, you know, if people like it, you know, because if they have too much invested in it on the front end with everything that's going on, chances are, you know, it'll never move beyond a first season. You know, I look at DC's Swamp Thing. You know, DC's Swamp Thing that was on their DC Universe app, which is now showing, I think it's still showing on the CW. You know, that was a really great show. And the whole reason they canceled is because in Louisiana, where they'd been shooting, they lost their tax credits. And because they lost their tax credits, they shut the whole production down because it was just going to cost them too much money without the tax credits. So anything you can do to put something together to have it be more cost effective, you know, as long as you're trying to tell good stories and you're trying to be cost effective, I'm all down for that, because it means there's a greater chance if it's popular, if people like it, or if you want to move forward with it. It's a lot easier to do a season 2 or to do a sequel or to do something that moves beyond, because, you know, you didn't put, you know, all your eggs in one basket and then it didn't work.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Me personally, I am a little disappointed that it's animated. I hadn't heard of this. I had no idea that this was happening until I found this article last week. I had no idea they were working on anything Gremlins anymore, which I thought was kind of funny, because there are so many remakes happening. There are so many reboots happening. There are so many sequels happening. You know, we were just talking about like the Battlestar Galactica movie last week. There's so much stuff going on with so much retro content, and I hadn't heard anything about Gremlins until I saw this, and I was a little disappointed once I realized that it was not going to be the actual Gremlins, you know, like the puppets and stuff like that, that it was going to be a animated show. And also that it's geared towards kids. I thought that's interesting too, because, you know, Gremlins is actually part of the big controversy that created the PG-13 rating. You know, the Temple of Doom and Gremlins are the two movies that really created the PG-13 rating, because a lot of parents were really upset about both of those films, that they took their kids there thinking that they were kid-friendly, and they really weren't. But they really didn't justify an R rating either. That's where the PG-13 rating really comes from. So it's kind of interesting to me that they did that, because, I don't know, I might have even gone the other direction and tried to make Gremlins a little bit more, you know, more R or something like that.
I could see that. I mean, I totally remember that controversy back in the day, because there's a lot of people, specifically upset, with Gremlins. I remember that. I remember just personally being slightly horrified the first time I saw Temple of Doom anyway, because it's just so much gorier and grosser and whatever than even Raiders was. Like it's very extreme compared to Raiders. And I remember too as a kid being confused because technically Raiders takes place, or Temple of Doom takes place before Raiders, and that never really made sense to me. Like, why would you do a sequel that supposedly happens before? Even back then, prequels didn't make sense to me. So, but there you go.
I did not even see the Temple of Doom when it came out, and I think that was part of the reason why. I did see Gremlins, but I did not see the Temple of Doom until I was much older, and I think that was one of the big reasons why. But I did see Gremlins, and I do remember that controversy about those two movies, and like I said, it's basically what created the PG-13 rating.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll see how it is when it comes out, because we covered on the show before, they had that kid-centric Rocketeer show that actually did come out, that we talked about on the show previously. And not only did it come out, but it actually got nominated for some Emmys. And I went over to try and check some of it out just out of curiosity. And it's so made for kids, like I couldn't even attempt to watch it. You know what I mean? It's just, with an adult sensibility, it's for me anyway, it's effectively unwatchable. And I always find it weird when, a studio will take something and they'll pigeonhole it so hard that, someone else can't enter into it, enjoy it, because it literally, you feel stupid for watching it. You know what I mean? Because it's clearly not made for you. I mean, not that they have to, but I look at Batman the Animated Series, and they made that show for everyone, and adults can enjoy it and like it for what it is. Kids can enjoy it and like it for what it is. And it resonates because of that, and it has a lasting impact. But shows that are too pigeonholed just for a kid audience, they're kind of short.
But the irony there, Dave, is I love the animated series. Like, that's my Batman, that's my Joker. I've said that many times. I can't get my kids into it; they don't like it.
Well, that's interesting.
But they love Lego Batman. You know what I mean? So,
well,
I don't know what to tell you, man. It's just that's what you're up against. You know what I mean? When you say something like that, that is what you're up against. Is like, how do you appeal to all those different demographics? It's not as easy as it sounds. You know what I mean?
No, I'm not saying it is simple, but I just remember, I was a teenager watching it and a big Batman fan from the comics, and having grown up on the Adam West show. And loved the 89 movie. Like, the 89 movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. And then I introduced my brother, kind of, we watched a lot of Batman stuff together, but he was watching Batman the Animated Series for the first time when I was watching it. And he's 13 years younger than me, and it clicked with him big time, So, I just feel like that at some point, as with all generations, just as TV changed the radio generation, I feel like the internet has changed the TV generation. You know what I mean? And that we're going to be in a different place. I talked earlier about how some younger people I know who were watching The Mandalorian. They felt like that, the episode The Marshal, that it just wasn't working for them because it just felt like a filler episode. Yeah. And I just think that's where we are. I don't know how all you can do at the end of the day as a content creator is create something that you hope people will like. You got to make some market decisions based off who you're trying to target. But at some point, you're just trying to tell a good story and hopefully, either create a good film or create a good comic or write a good book or whatever. And then you just have to let it loose and, let it be what it's going to be. But I just with that particular Rocketeer series, I wished it hadn't been quite so dumbed down for young kids, because I love that character, and it'd been fun to have something kind of new from that universe, to enjoy. But again, that's just me.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you on that. Getting back to Gremlins, Jane had mentioned I was watching Gremlins, and when they started changing, I got up and turned the TV off. Freaked me out. And I think a lot of people had that reaction to Gremlins. As I was talking about before, that's why the PG-13 rating became a thing. That and Temple of Doom. It truly created that rating. And then Gravity Station from Twitch is out here, and he's saying hi. So we appreciate you stopping by and coming on the show. And if you have any other opinions or anything like about what we're talking about, please share them with us.
Hello, Gravity Station. So that's all I had for pop culture this week, Eric. I just wanted to talk about, the YouTube, Zack Snyder Justice League trailer being pulled down. And then I just want to take a moment to celebrate Godzilla on his 66th birthday.
Right on.
So, who knew that Godzilla Day was yesterday with everything else going on?
Yeah, I don't think anybody did, quite frankly.
We could have maybe used Godzilla stomping around in the States, you know what I mean, just to add an extra level of tension and drama to the proceedings,
Yeah, there you go.
Can they get those votes counted before Godzilla destroys the voting center?
Yeah, apparently not, by the way. Apparently not.
No, apparently not.
Very speedy with that. So
they can't do it even when there isn't a Godzilla about to destroy the voting center.
Exactly. Right on. Well, did you have anything for Streaming Wars? You have anything for Streaming Wars tonight?
No, because I keep finding, like I said, the Zack Snyder thing. I keep finding these stories. They're pop culture, but I feel like they bleed into Streaming Wars too.
Yeah, a lot of it does. Yeah, especially right now.
So I've been trying to pick kind of more open-ended stuff. So if the Rogues Gallery wants to wax poetic, we can really talk about it. But since no one had a lot of comments, beyond your comments, it kind of doesn't take up a lot of time. So that's what I was thinking of, because I felt like that kind of hit both buttons. Because most of the stuff I've been finding with Streaming Wars, to be honest with you, it's so rumory. I don't know like how legit it is at times. But what do you have for Streaming Wars this week? Should I set it up or just go right into it?
I think we just go right into it.
All right, so go for it.
I had a couple, but I think this is the one that kind of like seemed to sum things up pretty good. So I found this article. I thought it was pretty interesting. So this is from the nationalinterest.org, okay, which I haven't used this source before, but this is a pretty interesting article. It's dated November 2nd. And the title reads, "A New Look at the Streaming Wars." It says the research firm Antenna has released a report stating that the premium subscription video on demand, SVOD, market grew 37% year over year in the third quarter, compared to 34% annual growth in the second quarter. So it says the year 2020 and the year of the coronavirus pandemic in particular has been a huge time for streaming services. Many people have spent their months quarantined at home watching streaming shows, while multiple new streaming services arrived throughout the year. It says the research firm Antenna has released a report stating that the premium subscription video on demand market grew 37% year over year in the third quarter compared to 34% annual growth in the second quarter. Meanwhile, total subscriptions jumped 4% from the second quarter of 2020 to the third. That's not a huge amount of growth there. It says Antenna found that Disney Plus was 2/3 of the total growth. CBS All Access grew by 41% year over year, which I'm really surprised about that. I didn't realize that they had done that well. While Showtime grew 32%, HBO grew 24%, Starz grew 22%, Hulu grew 11%, and Netflix, here's the key too, Netflix grew by 1%, which is crazy. But again, keep in mind that 1% of Netflix is bigger than a lot of these other numbers are in actuality, in actual real numbers. Antenna attributed Netflix lower than usual growth to, quote, churn caused by the Cuties controversy, which we haven't really talked about that with good reason. I think we haven't talked about that, but they're saying that the Cuties controversy actually did hurt Netflix a little bit. It says in terms of quarterly growth, the biggest winner was Apple TV Plus, This is also something surprising, especially if you listen to this show and our opinions on Apple TV Plus. It says they jumped.
Hold on. So they're saying the biggest winner was Apple TV Plus
because they jumped 17% from the second quarter to the third, while Disney Plus and CBS All Access were tied at 11%, followed by HBO with 9%. In other words, they had the biggest growth. We're talking about real numbers here. So that's what I think is interesting, as opposed to perception, because I talk about that a lot when we're talking about these things, because I run the real numbers. And what they're saying is Apple TV actually had the most growth compared to Disney Plus, CBS All Access, and HBO. And obviously, Netflix growth as a percent was actually very low. But again, I do want to make the point, to be fair, Netflix is much bigger than any of these other streaming services, much bigger. So 1% of Netflix could possibly be more than, say, 17% of Apple Plus, because Apple Plus has a lot less subscribers. Nevertheless, they're growing at a higher rate than the other platforms, which I think is completely counterintuitive to what you and I think and have thought, because we haven't given Apple Plus like any credit at all.
Huh. Well, I just look at it from the standpoint of I don't hear anyone talking about any of the shows on Apple TV Plus, so that's why I would think that they're not a winner in the streaming wars. I never hear anyone talking about any of their content, like at all. And I mentioned before, the only one of their shows that really kind of appealed to me was that, Snoopy and Space show. I was like, I'd like to see that, but I mean, I understand they're talking about actual real numbers, but I'm also thinking in terms of like, is there anyone even talking about the content? Like, is it resonating with people? I never hear anyone talking about Apple TV Plus shows. So
yeah, I don't
hard to imagine them. Yeah.
But apparently there are more people subscribing to Apple TV Plus. Now, here's the other side of this, what they're talking about, the actual market share. So it says, of the total SVD subscriptions as of the end of the third quarter, Netflix is sitting at 35% of the market, Hulu's at 20%, and HBO has 9%. It says in the third quarter of 2019, so 1 year ago, at the same point, the third quarter, Netflix had 48% of the total subscriptions. So that is a pretty significant drop from, almost 50%. Now they're sitting at 35%. Hulu was at 25%. Now they're sitting at 20%. So that's pretty equivalent considering all the competition they have. And Disney Plus, it says an Apple TV launched in November of 2019 with HBO Max, Peacock, and of course the now defunct Quibi, all debuting in 2020. We've talked about Quibi being kind of like the first real legitimate casualty of the streaming wars. So I just thought this was interesting because, again, there's perception and then there's reality, and it's kind of interesting to see, even as well as Netflix is doing or has been doing in terms of their raw numbers of subscriptions. You're seeing their growth is slowing down, and they are losing significant market share.
Well, and I'd seen some of that, but I'd heard some of the Netflix thing, for example, being attributed to like the cuties backlash. You know what I mean? Like sort of like content as playing a much larger role in some of this than people were thinking.
That's what they said in this article as well. They totally think that that's something. So the question becomes whether that is something that's more just like a glitch and they'll get over it, or if it's going to be, a symptom of a larger problem or not.
Well, that goes to buoy up what we were talking earlier in the show when we were talking about the Mandalorian earlier, and Doomcock's thing where he was talking about the fact that that he's hearing from people that Mandalorian is underperforming, and that some of the complaints about Star Wars in general have gotten to the point where it's even beginning to impact The Mandalorian. And The Mandalorian, I would say, in my opinion, is not a bad Star Wars show. I'd say it's a great Star Wars show. And the fact that it's being impacted, because of sort of some of the negative, how certain aspects of, the current Disney wars has been handled, that's unfortunate. So it would make sense, that all these different factors, they do obviously or can obviously play a role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, content is king, right? So if they don't like the content, and that is something I've seen also. There was another article I was reading about Disney Plus where they were talking about not necessarily that The Mandalorian was less popular, but how much Disney Plus is reliant on The Mandalorian, how they really don't have anything else. Like the only other thing they could really talk about was Hamilton, and they just felt like there was there's nothing else there because everything has been delayed. I think there's actually going to be a lot more riding on WandaVision and whether WandaVision is a hit or not than Mandalorian, because I do think Mandalorian's a hit. I mean, I haven't seen the numbers yet. I'm waiting for them. Hopefully the Nielsen's will have some independent numbers out there at some point, that we can actually talk about. But my perception, and of course my perception apparently about Apple Plus has been completely wrong, but my perception is that it is a very popular show. But if Disney Plus is just a one-trick pony and only has one good show that only has 8 episodes a year, that's not going to be good for the platform, right? So, to me, I think WandaVision is going to be a very big, it's going to be a big deal to see whether WandaVision actually resonates or not.
Well, and I find WandaVision to be a big deal too, because it's the only way that, really they're going to be able to even try and connect with the large MCU fan base, because, we're not getting anything else, MCU this year at all. So, WandaVision has to really click with people, because that's the only way they're going to be able to get their MCU fix, unless they're just going to rewatch some of the, the older films.
Which, it is interesting when you look at the Nielsen's, because so much of that stuff is legacy content. A lot of older shows are in that top 10, which I find really interesting, and strange. I mean, to me, it's counterintuitive. I think that people, in my mind, it's my perception again, I feel like people go to streaming services mostly to see some new show that they've heard about. Like the reason that I got Disney Plus was I wanted to see The Mandalorian. That's the main reason I got Disney Plus. It's the main reason I have it now. But apparently, you see that, especially with Netflix, because Netflix is number one. A lot of the stuff that's most popular on Netflix in terms of actual viewing, in terms of the amount of time people are actually viewing stuff, it's legacy content. It's older shows. And that's really weird for Netflix, because Netflix is really into new content now. They've kind of been dumping the legacy content in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, and part of that too is because, to an extent, so many of these content providers, they're trying to pull their legacy content back. It's funny because when I think about it, I think about them pulling the legacy content back because, to use that term filler from earlier in the episode, it feels like in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, well, they need filler, right? So when people are scrolling through, it looks like they have a bunch of content available. But it goes even further too, as we see more and more of these actual, numbers for who's actually watching what. Because I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I think I said at the beginning of this episode, well, the news, maybe it was just us talking, but I mentioned how it's hard sometimes to remember what was like an off-camera conversation, what was on camera. But we had been discussing, and I'd been talking about how right now when my wife and we have something on and we're watching television, or if I'm in the studio and I have something on, I'm usually working. So I don't want anything on that I really have to focus on too much, because if I get busy, I need to be able to focus on that. So because of that, in the studio, when I'm working in the studio and here where I'm, either cutting heat transfer vinyl or making whatever to put on shirts and stuff, because I've got a bunch of different things here I'm doing. I usually have regular show on, and I've been on Hulu. And then when my wife and I are watching stuff right now, we've been watching reruns of the Golden Girls. And Golden Girls is like I was a kid when we used to watch that show. You know what I mean? And that's, well, it's old in so many different ways, because the Golden Girls is about old ladies. But anyhow, I thought there was a joke there, but there really isn't. But anyhow, the point being, right, is that for me, I am definitely watching older content, and that's the majority of what I'm watching. And a lot of the newer shows that I've really enjoyed, they're being canceled. Like Dark Crystal. I was really looking forward to watching more Dark Crystal. It looks like Ozark apparently is done. Ozark is one of my favorite shows on Netflix, and I guess Ozark is also done. So, that's the thing. It's like of the newer stuff that they introduced, a lot of that stuff, I loved Glow. Glow was canceled. You know what I mean? Like how, so, I don't know. I think, I don't think that's driving me towards older content. But I'm definitely watching more older content myself. So,
as am I. Yeah, I tend to do that myself. I mean, I watch a lot of Comet, which is a over-the-air broadcast television network. They have a lot of sci-fi material. Right now, they have the Ron D. Moore Battlestar Galactica. They have Sliders. They have Stargate, the series. They also show the movie sometimes. They recently started showing some of the Star Trek films, actually. Just last weekend, they showed Star Trek 4. They had a marathon, Star Trek 4, Generations, First Contact, and Nemesis. They actually had a little marathon, and they're going to be showing those films again throughout the month. So I tend to watch that a lot. I've always talked about Heroes and Icons because that has like that 6-hour Star Wars block, 6 days a week, where they go through the original series all the way to Enterprise. I watch that a lot. So I watch a lot of older content myself, but I still get surprised that it seems to me, especially when you think of how Netflix has invested so heavily in these new shows and have been going into debt, to make all these new shows. You would think that would be the majority of their viewership. And sometimes these numbers seem to say otherwise. Now, Jane has an interesting thing that she's talking about, which is she says, I have Disney Plus through Verizon. My free year is ending this month. Do you think people losing the free access would affect the numbers? That's going to be something that's totally going to play out as this happens, because I know Jane's not alone. I know there are other people that their free year is coming up. So that's going to be interesting to see how that affects the numbers as well.
Well, and I've been surprised too, because there's been a lot of discussion in different quarters. We've talked about it here a little bit, but not too much. A lot of the streaming services, because of the shutdown, because of the pandemic, there's been a lot of discussion that some of these studios are either looking to invest more into animation, or they're going to move more into animation. There's been a lot of talk, for example, like AT&T has been settling almost anything that isn't bolted to the ground that was once Warner Brothers. And if I remember correctly, they actually sold their anime division. Actually,
they're in the process. They're in the process of selling Crunchyroll to Sony.
Yeah. And then Sony, I think, currently owns like Funimation and some other stuff already.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about that this is setting up like a big, on the anime side, like a big battle that's going to be happening between, Netflix and potentially, obviously, whatever Sony has to offer.
No,
Sony owns.
Netflix has been definitely investing in animation, and anime in particular. There's no doubt about that. And Crunchyroll, I know from my kids, is a major player for anime content, because my kids all use Crunchyroll, and they really like it. So I think that's interesting. And we've talked, that does also go into that point. We've talked about what AT&T is doing right now, where they seem to be just selling off everything. And I don't think they even understand what they have half the time,
Yeah, and it's weird too, because supposedly the logic behind AT&T buying Warner Brothers in the first place was the fact that they wanted that library so they could have, this amazing, streaming video, content that they could offer, packaging. At least this was the theory we were hearing, that they could package in with their phone offers, like come to AT&T, get this, and then you also get like this amazing access to all this Warner Brothers content. But
Right.
then they're selling everything that isn't bolting to the ground, like IP and content has no value. Like they're just burning through this stuff. And it's just so weird to see because it's like, well, then why in the hell did you buy Warner Brothers in the first place? If you're just going to
I can tell you this because I'm an AT&T customer, and I got a new phone not too long ago, and it was right around the time that HBO Max was coming out. It might have been like a month before, but it was right around the time that HBO Max was coming out. And at no point did anybody let me know that I would have access to HBO Max on my phone, nor was it preloaded on my phone. Ironically, DC Universe was, but that wasn't free. I didn't even get a free trial, which is like, that's a no-brainer right there, right? Why didn't AT at least give me like some sort of free trial for DC Universe when it was already loaded on my phone anyway? It's bizarre because I've actually read an article where they were talking about how the HBO Max numbers are really skewed because AT&T includes everyone eligible for the service, which means anybody that has one of their phones is quote unquote an HBO Max subscriber. But there's a huge gap in the number of people that have access to HBO Max technically and actually have downloaded the app and used it. And I think a big part of that is because AT&T has not communicated to their customers properly to let them even know that that's available to them. I just found out by chance. Nobody ever told me. I just kind of found out because I do this show and I do research and stuff, and I realized, oh, so HBO Max is free for me. But I think a lot of that's how weird it is. I think like a lot of AT&T people don't even understand that. They don't even know that.
Yeah, that to me is so strange because that was part of supposed the logic behind why AT&T wanted to buy Warner's in the first place. And then in addition to that too, you know, I've been reading all these articles and hearing all this chatter about how, you know, the studios are wanting to invest more in animation. I am still kind of stunned that on as far as Disney Plus goes, where they need content. And even further than the fact that they need content is also the fact that for MCU fans, I feel like the wait for content's made even worse by the fact that they took the break after Endgame. And I keep asking myself, well, where's that What If show? Like that What If show isn't like it's in continuity because it reflects events that we've seen in the films, but it's an animated show, right? And in addition to that, even though it reflects events that we've seen and showing them from a different perspective, it's not like they have to worry about giving something away on a What If show that's going to pay off in a movie because they shouldn't be connected, you know, because they're what if stories.
Right.
So I'm kind of surprised that we haven't heard any new movement, any new anything, because when I think of Disney, I used to always think, when I think Disney, I think of animation.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because Disney seems absolutely obsessed with live action productions.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And that's actually, that sort of echoes what happened to the company when they started to go downhill. You know, when they had that lull, a big part of that lull was because they started to abandon animation. They abandoned like their core, and they were getting way into live action. They were acquiring other studios like I think Touchstone. There were a couple other studios that they started acquiring at that time, and it almost bankrupted the company. But I don't know. Maybe history is going to repeat itself. You know.
That would be interesting because that does mean, as far as this is concerned, that maybe there's the possibility that they'll return back to their core audience or their core business, and maybe we'll get like an amazing, like, you know, lightning in a bottle film like Little Mermaid again. You know, because Little Mermaid's a great film. You know, and they had that amazing kind of Renaissance run of films. You know, when you talk about Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, you know, Lion King, you know. I know Rescuers Down Under shouldn't count, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I love the Rescuers. So I'm curious to see if that's what's going to happen, you know, because that's the thing I've been most kind of surprised at, is that I hear all this chatter that the studios are looking to move to animation because animation can continue to be produced with the current restrictions that are in place.
Right.
But then I look at AT&T and they're like, yeah, we'll dump this animated division and we'll get rid of this and we'll get rid of that. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, you guys have divisions that were producing the kind of content that everyone else is hoping to do, and you're getting rid of them like they're like you have no use for them. You know, like what is, I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows what they're doing at the moment. It feels to me like a bunch of people bought a bunch of stuff and now they go, well, crap, what are we going to do with this? Well, can you just sell that thing over there? That's annoying. Just get rid of it. And then I don't know what we're going to do with this over here, but you just sell that right now. And when you get done, we'll figure out what to do with this over here. Like, that's what it feels like is going on. Like, I don't know why we bought all this stuff, but can we just get rid of it or something? You know?
Well, the other issue is that AT&T has a lot of debt, and part of what's happening is they're literally like cannibalizing themselves to deal with that debt. That's also something that's going on.
Well, it feels awful short-sighted to me.
It is, but what are they going to do? Sometimes a company puts itself, paints itself into a corner so badly. Like I see that as a possibility with Netflix as well. Nobody else is really, echoing that sentiment right now to that point. But I feel like if Netflix keeps going on the path they're going on, they're going to wind up in the same place, and they're going to wind up selling everything. They're going to be winding up selling IP like crazy, because at some point, you got to be making money and you got to be breaking even. You can't just be continually acquiring debt, to infinity. So
and I'm kind of surprised with Netflix too that the touch tone shows that really resonate with people that people talk about, things like Ozark, things like Glow. I'm surprised that they're so willing and ready to just end those productions, and just be done with it. Because I feel like that those over time could be those fun kind of cult films or shows that people continue to eventually go back to and revisit. Because I've rewatched episodes of Glow, because they're fun. And I feel like that with some of this stuff, I feel like they're in at times they're in such a rush to do, like, they're so busy throwing things to the wall, they don't even know what they've grabbed, it seems like sometimes. And it's like they're like, I don't. It's the same thing with the AT&T thing I was making before. It feels like they're like, I don't know what to do with it. Just get rid of it. What's next? And I feel like that they're not really taking, because Netflix's big problem sometimes with their shows and their content is they make no effort to advertise it at all, or even let people know it's out there. It's like something shows up on their service and it'll be highlighted for like a week and then it's gone. And if it doesn't catch on within the first 3 or 4 days, it's trash, get rid of it. But it could be a really, good production. It's just, people, there's so much content available right now that sometimes that things that are really good are being jettisoned too fast because there's just too much. So, because, man, I think about the last few years, there's been some really, really great content that's been created, but it gets forgotten because there's so much stuff coming out that, people stop and go, well, wait a minute, has anything good come out? And it's like, well, yeah, there has, but there's been so much other stuff that you forget about it. It's like a deluge of just sometimes mediocre stuff that's just nonstop. And you forget about the good show that was in the middle of all that. So we talked that Paul Rudd show that we watched that we kind of liked. I don't think they're going to do anything with that. And that was an interesting show. That show got pushed by the wayside so quick, Yeah,
now, that I don't think that show resonated at all. I mean, I never saw anything about it. I never saw anybody posting about it or anything. Yeah. I wouldn't even know it existed, except that you suggest that we take a look at it, and I did like it, and I did think it was really interesting. But I don't think, from what I saw, it didn't have an impact at all.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's amazing to me how much good content that we're burning through at a feverish pace. Whereas before, like back in the day, obviously because of production and and just the way things were, like stuff would have had a little bit more time to breathe and probably could have found an audience. So I don't know. I guess that goes back to that idea that we was talking about the Hollywood machine. You know, the machine's just got to be fit. The machine's just got to be fit. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. You know what I mean? The machine's just got to be fit, you know. So that idea.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have anything else for Streaming Wars or?
Nope, that's it.
All right, cool. Do we think we're good to just go to the outro or?
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right, very cool. Well, so I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of Retro Rogues Live. I think for some people we might have been on a little too early tonight, but we want to thank those of you who did join us and participated in the Rogues Gallery. Again, my name is Dave Beatty, and I have been one of your hosts. You can see my current labor of love, my t-shirt company, as well as see some of the t-shirt designs that are available, as well as potentially consider purchasing a Retro Rogues Live t-shirt, helping to support what we're doing here at Retro Rogues Live. You can do that and see all the things that are available over at kirbytees.com. That's KIRBYTS.com. So definitely check that out. You can also order a custom shirt for yourself if you want to. But hope you'll go there and check that out and see what we've got going on. I want to thank Eric Alexander, my co-host, for being here on the show and providing his unique perspective on all these interesting topics we were talking about. Eric, please tell the folks who will be watching or listening at home where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I'm most active on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is @BassGod14. So that's @BASSGOD14. That's also the official Twitch, and that's also the official Twitter for the Retro Rogues Live. So you can find me there. You can make comments, all that kind of stuff. I'm more than happy to respond to them. Always more than happy to respond to show suggestions or topics that you want us to check out, whether it's a collectible or some news you've heard, or maybe even it's just a rumor that you've heard about a particular streaming show or just anything that involves pop culture in general. So we're always open to that kind of stuff. I did want to also mention that we are going to be pursuing a recorded show, basically, that Dave and I are working on right now, that may be premiering as early as next week. It's going to be basically a spinoff of our mystery, our special mystery shows that we had for Halloween. So we're going to be doing a lot of content from things like Unsolved Mysteries. We're talking about looking at some other programs as well, and even just stuff that we might find out there on the internet, mysteries, paranormal, all that kind of stuff. So definitely, I hope you folks look forward to that, and you can give us some suggestions on that as well as we pursue that. So we'll still be doing the live thing on Wednesdays, but we're also going to be probably doing that recorded show that's going to be Retro Rogues Mysteries, that we're also going to be doing that possibly as early as next week, but that will be a recorded show. So we'll see how that works out, and hopefully some of you folks will enjoy it, because I know we did get one of our episodes, we got a pretty good, robust Rogues Gallery going for one of those Unsolved Mystery shows that we did. And then we had a comment earlier from Jane when we were talking about the Godzilla movies and Godzilla Day and all that kind of stuff. And we were talking about some of the other things that maybe were before Godzilla, and she mentioned there was also Mighty Joe Young. So with that, we will leave her with the last word.